Starting out your week, we open phone and text lines for our own informal poll about the job you think Trump is doing. Do the historically known numbers give you hope? Does the dysfunction and cruelty stir you to action? Or is this all just an aberration?
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we talk with Evan Horowitz from the Tufts Center for State Policy Analysis about what all this economic uncertainty from D.C. is doing for our own economy here in Massachusetts, not just for the big corporations, but the state budget as well. It's all ahead in the first hour of Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. As President Trump's 100th day in office approaches, the White House is emphasizing his actions combating illegal immigration. As NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports, today the White House said going forward, state and local law enforcement will be a key part of deportations.
At a briefing, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed last week's Immigration and Customs Enforcement operation in Florida, Operation Tidal Wave. She said it resulted in the arrests of nearly 800 people in the U.S. illegally.
Operation Tidal Wave is a preview of what is to come around this country. Large-scale operations that employ our state and local enforcement partners to get criminal, illegal aliens off our streets.
Today, Trump is expected to sign 2 executive actions related to border security, including one that will target sanctuary cities, jurisdictions with laws that limit cooperation with immigration authorities. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News, the White House.
Russia says it will observe a 3-day ceasefire in its war with Ukraine. This will run May 8th through May 10th. The Kremlin says this will mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. This comes as North Korea is acknowledging it deployed troops to Russia to help Russian troops fight in Ukraine. NPR's Charles Maines reports from Moscow.
North Korea merely confirmed what South Korean and Western intelligence services have long said. Pyongyang secretly deployed soldiers to Russia beginning last fall to drive out Ukrainian troops from Russia's Kursk region. Russia only acknowledged the North Korean military assistance this past weekend when the head of Russia's armed forces thanked the North Koreans for help in fully liberating the territory. Kyiv and pro-Russian military bloggers insist Ukrainian forces are still operating in the area. Yet in a statement, Putin said Russia would never forget North Korean heroes who lost their lives in defense of Kursk, adding a bond forged with North Korea on the battlefield was bound to develop further. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
The U.S. Supreme Court hears arguments today in a case with important consequences for children with disabilities. The question before the justices is this: what do parents have to prove when a school district refuses to provide needed services for a child with serious disabilities? NPR's Christina Gatti reports.
Ava Tharp is a teenage girl who suffers from serious disabilities caused by a rare form of epilepsy. She has so many seizures in the morning hours that her public school in Kentucky arranged her schedule to be in the afternoon only, including giving her instruction at home in the early evening. But when her family moved to Minnesota, her new school refused to accommodate her late-day schedule, and her learning hours were reduced to 65% of what her peers received. Ava's parents sued the school system, claiming that it failed to live up to the requirements specified under 3 different disability rights laws enacted by Congress. Now the Supreme Court will decide. Christina Gatti, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow's up 140 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The MBTA is closing a large portion of the Red Line tonight. As GBH's Jeremy Siegel reports, trains won't run between Ashmont and JFK UMass through Wednesday.
The shutdown is so crews can do critical work on what's called the Ashmont Diamond, an aging piece of infrastructure at the end of the Ashmont branch that lets trains turn around after completing their trips. The T is encouraging regular riders to use the Fairmount commuter rail line instead, which will be free while the shutdown is in effect. There will also be free shuttle buses and an accessible van serving all stops along the Ashmont branch. The closure could mean significant delays, though. T officials say shuttle bus riders going from Mattapan to Park Street should plan for an extra hour of travel time. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News 89.7.
All 12 of the Harvard University students and recent grads whose student visas were revoked by President Trump's State Department had their visas status switched back to active. According to the Harvard International Office, the reversal took place on Saturday, but Tricia McLaughlin, a Department of Homeland Security spokesperson, says that the Trump administration has not reversed course on a single revocation. Celtics head back to the Garden tomorrow night for Game 5 of their series with the Magic. Last night's big win put Gang Green up 3-1, and the Red Sox continue their road trip tomorrow. They open a series with the Blue Jays in Toronto. Sunny mid-70s today. We could see 80 degrees tomorrow. We're at 66 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Doris Duke Foundation, which aims to support the well-being of people and the planet for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Houston Bradley, I am Marjorie Eek, and you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to return to the Boston Public Library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. Governor Maura Healey will join us May 9th, and Attorney General Andrea Campbell will join us May 13th. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So we made it. Today marks 100 days since Donald Trump took office for the second time, and it really is remarkable what he's been able to do in such a short time. Targeting American higher education, snatching pro-Palestinian protesters, alienating us from allies worldwide over a tariff policy that confounds most economists, and of course those multiple signal leaks about military actions in Yemen. And the latest just revealed this weekend, he's managed to deport 3 young kids, one of whom is a 4-year-old with cancer, all 3 of whom are United States citizens. But don't worry, just a couple of days to go, 1,363 specifically. The lines are open at 877-301-8970. The topic is Trump's first 100 days, according to a survey from the Associated Press. Actually, virtually every survey that's come out relating to his first 100 days. He holds the lowest 100-day job approval rating of any president in the past 80 years. So, are the American people bristling at Trump's ever-expanding authoritarianism and cruelty, or is it just false hope? Remember, we thought the reversal of Roe v. Wade would be the defining issue of the 2024 election. Civil society would surely rise up and reject all this, right? Well, or is it just true that the arc of moral justice is long and change is taking time? Your reaction to 100 days of Donald Trump and Donald Trump Part 2, and your reaction to these polls, almost all of which shows declining numbers on everything, including some of the issues he was strongest on, the economy, and even on immigration issues, deportation issues. Fewer than half of the American people support him, and those numbers are in decline. 877-301-8970. I love when he compares himself to FDR and his first 100 days. And that was a very busy 100 days, too. FDR was building the federal government to help people as opposed to destroying the federal government to hurt people. And I have to say, I want to apologize. Well, I don't know, apologize. Maybe it's apologies. I've said repeatedly, my bigger problem than Donald Trump is the fact that his supporters are so unwilling to look at the reality. Well, a lot of them are looking at the reality. And while he's still pretty strong...
it's the independents.
Well, independents decide elections. Republicans
stay with people are still in the cult.
No, but Republicans stay with the Republicans. Democrats stay with Democrats. Independents decide elections. He's down 20-plus points with independents in this country because they're paying attention, which is a really big thing.
Well, I must admit a certain pettiness here, cold-bloodedness. I'm really happy that he's having a really bad day today. He must be really incensed. On the other hand, people aren't that crazy about Democrats either. I think they're disgusted with all of us at this particular juncture. It could have to do with all the money in politics, which keeps people from doing what they should do instead of what they think what their donors want. But in any case, it's very bad news for President Trump. And
did you read Nate Cohn's analysis of the first of the polls, the New York Times, Siena thing? Let me read this. Nate Cohn obviously does this kind of analysis. For most presidents, first 100 days, New York Times, are as good as it gets. It's hard to remember now, but at this time 4 years years ago, Joe Biden was still being compared to FDR. Even the doom presidents, think Carter's first term or George W. Bush's second, still had positive approval ratings after 100 days. This is the key. It's not easy to burn this much goodwill this fast, and it usually doesn't get any easier from here, meaning what I read into that is even if, for example, he reverses his tariff policy, which is causing great economic pain for a lot of people already and much more to come, it won't undo the damage. I don't know if that's true, but Nate Cohn knows a lot more about polling and presidential politics than I do.
There are a lot of interesting things here. I mean, even though immigration and cleaning up the border was a big deal, and a lot of Democrats did not like the chaos at the border either, only 31% in this poll talk about how they support how he has treated Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. He's the guy.
I'm stunned.
Only 31%. They do not like that idea. They do not like the idea of deporting any U.S. citizen. This guy was not a U.S. citizen, but he was wrongly sent to a hellhole in El Salvador. And they are very much opposed to the president defying any kind of Supreme Court ruling. A lot of the independents and Democrats are widely opposed to his defying any court ruling. Republicans seem to be more okay with his defying court rulings.
Can we get back to Abrego Garcia for a second?
Yeah.
You know what's most amazing about that is that since the messaging by the Trump people, everybody from Kristi Noem at Department of Homeland Security to Caroline Leavitt, the press person, to Trump himself, to Vance, all of them talk about the worst kind of gang member. It's been relentless. It's been brilliantly and deceitfully portrayed. The fact that the American people show sympathy for the plight of this family and this guy, to me, is a really eye-opening, wonderful kind of deal.
Joe Rogan isn't so sure he belonged in El Salvador either.
That may be a critical issue. 877-301-8970. So how are you feeling after 100 days? And do you think this polling is aberrational, that he can fix it all if he just reverses his positions, which he does almost all the time on everything?
You mentioned the economy. People aren't happy with the economy. But you know what else surprised me?
What's that?
That two-thirds of Americans are supporting Harvard University.
I was shocked by that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Listen to this. More than 3 in 4 oppose reductions in federal funding for medical research. So they don't think that cancer research has anything to do with anti-Semitism, which of course it does not. 7 in 10 oppose the administration's effort to increase the government's role in running private universities. You know, I was telling you this before the show. We've fretted a lot at how fast democratic norms have disappeared in places like Hungary. But, and I don't know which commentator was saying this, but somebody was saying this morning. It was in the Times, my favorite podcast, The Daily, that Americans have lived with freedoms since we began. You know, it's not like a lot of these countries that were former communist satellite countries and all these, but that are new to democracy. We're not so new to democracy. So maybe Americans aren't as the pushovers that some of the Trump people thought we were in terms of taking away people's rights.
I hope you're right. I hope that commentator is right. Let me read a few texts before we get started. Elias in Boston says, I feel like being asked to rate how Trump is doing is like being asked to rate how well a termite infestation is doing at renovating a house.
A good one.
Amber in Worcester, this is also a wonderful point. I really don't understand why the numbers are so low. He's doing exactly what he said he'd do. Perhaps his voters had no concept of the cruelty and chaos that would ensue. I think that's a great point. You know, before you go ahead. Some poll this weekend, the number one descriptor that people endorsed in the high 60%, chaos, was how they described the first term.
Yeah, but I don't think people thought he was going to take away tens of thousands of people's jobs. I don't think he thought he was going to slow down cancer research and diabetes research and crack down in these colleges.
What they think the consequence of dramatic reducing of the federal budget was going to be? Nothing?
I
waste
think
and inefficiency?
They fell for that ancient line that it's going to be waste, fraud, and efficiency. Okay. I think the big thing was the economy. That's why he won, wasn't it? The economy and the border. And he
didn't fix the economy on day one?
No.
He didn't. Did he end the Ukraine-Russia conflict on day one?
No, I mean, to Trump's credit, almost nobody is crossing the border anymore. Why would you at this particular junction? So we certainly have solved that problem.
Anonymous texter says, only 100 days, it feels like 100 years. It does, doesn't it? 877-301-8970.
Let's go to Jay in Somerville. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Jay.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, guys.
Sure.
Short thing. I'm disgusted by this 100 days. I feel like the experiment of America is just vanishing before our eyes. But I wanted to point out that when you take children who are U.S. citizens out of the country, that's not being deported. Like,
you're totally right.
We don't even have a word for what is happening. And I hope you guys can talk to experts, because we need something that explains what's happening. It's like an extrajudicial capture of liberty or something. These people are supposed to be here.
That's a great
point,
point,
We should
Jake.
explain. The mother was the one that was deported and chose to take...
No, excuse me.
Okay.
The mother of the one who was deported, Tom Homan,
with no due
is
process,
saying, excuse me, 1 second, Jay. Tom Homan is saying that the mother chose. We have no reason to believe
a good point.
that
That's
Homan's
a good
telling the
point.
truth. And Jay, add the point you started adding a second ago.
Due process.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Jay.
Yeah, we need the due process.
Yeah.
And then deportation is the right word. But when you whisk people away and they're being captured, like the woman in Somerville, where I am right now, was captured by people wearing masks. Like, this is crazy. It's not deporting.
No, Jay, I'm really glad
word.
you said that. That is a really, really important thing, and we will correct ourselves. Jay, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Yeah, a lot of people are texting with that very same question. You know, that Homan was saying that they were not deported because...
Who do you believe, the lawyer for the women or Homan?
No, you're absolutely right, Jim.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I do not believe Mr. Homan.
877-301-8097. Can you imagine that, by the way? If we had said prior to this makes your point where you're contradicting what that texter said. If we had said there could be United States citizen children, we didn't even mention one of the kids has cancer. Did I say that?
Yes,
I did say that.
very serious
A 4-year-old has
cancer.
cancer, and I believe the meds were not taken along. I believe that's the case.
Well, you'd also think if you have very serious cancer, what country would you like to be in with your little 4-year-old getting treated? I think you'd want to be in the United States of America because he hasn't managed to ruin our health care.
Also, what
some would say
horrible
it's
thing?
already ruined, actually.
What horrible thing had these mothers done that they couldn't have waited through the due process proceeding that Jay mentioned a minute ago? Mothers, one was a mother of a 4 and a 7-year-old, I believe. One was a mother of a 2-year-old. Right? What was the rush? Were they members of some horrible gang that was doing horrible things?
That's an excellent point. Well, remember we heard this from Ayanna Pressley. I think it was the first time I heard it, the congresswoman who said in Trump term 1, cruelty is the point.
Yeah.
And
a guy wrote a book. There's a book about that, too, whatever it
when
is.
you look at Mr. Homan, you think cruelty is the point. Listen to this one. This is Joe in Ashford, Connecticut. First 100 days can sum it up in 2 words. Dumpster fire. Wait, maybe landfill fire. Wait, maybe make it 3 words. Toxic landfill fire. That's a pretty good one.
Lisa in Medford, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, guys. So I disagree with you on one thing. I do think there's a lot of border activity. It's just Americans leaving instead of people trying to get here.
But I'm bummed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. But no, seriously, I'm glad to see these polling numbers as bad as they are. It's not great for our country, of course, because we are in disarray, but it is showing people, this is what you voted for. These are the results of it, and now you don't like it. And so, start to think about what you really want and what's really important to you. It's a hard lesson. It's a hard lesson for us all to learn. I don't think the Democrats, which I'm a lifelong Democrat, I don't think the Democrats have come close to seizing the moment right now. We shouldn't be just relying on these polling numbers. But for me personally, I find some comfort in the fact that my fellow citizens are as disgusted as I am, and they do not like most of what's going on.
That's exactly my reaction to this, too. I was totally wrong. I was of the belief that the Trump support, not just the MAGA people, but the independents, was unshakable, and I was wrong. And I'm glad I'm wrong. Lisa, thank you for the call. By the way, it wasn't the book. It was Adam Serwer who wrote a piece in The Atlantic in 2018, the title of which was, or the phrase he coined was cruelty.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for that. But I never heard it until Presley said it. I must have missed that piece in The Atlantic, Jim. Anyway, Trump has seen a decline of 10 points among white people without a college degree.
That's also huge.
He's also down 13 points among adults under age 30 and 11 points among those who say they did not vote in November.
Okay, so the numbers for him on almost everything are in the 40% range. A little bit over 40, a little bit under 40.
None of his things he's doing have the majority popularity.
Right. So let's pick the number 40, who think he's doing well on tariffs, doing well in the economy, doing well. What are they seeing that a growing majority of Americans are not seeing? Is that just blind loyalty? I love Trump, right or wrong? I mean, what do you feel good about? As you say, the cruelty point? You can't feel good about the economy, can you? I mean,
well,
which everybody worries about.
I think some people think that we're going to have all this manufacturing come back. And when you have someone ask, well, it's going to take a long time. You just don't go out and build a building in 6 months or even like sometimes, years. They seem to think this is a short-term situation and that in the long run we'll win out. I guess that's...
Maybe you're right. You know what's also interesting about this sort of, I don't know, maybe there's a fourth leg. It seems to be a three-legged stool about defending democracy. One are the people themselves, arguably the most important, which at least for a day or two they appear to be. Two is the courts, and I think the courts are doing a pretty
I love the
good
support
job.
of these polls Americans feel toward the courts.
I'm shocked by it.
Yeah, that makes me very happy.
But the third leg is members of his own party, with the exception of an aberrational moment like when Chuck Grassley, I think he's 90 years old or 80-year-old senator from Iowa, was said Putin is the enemy, don't, cozy up to him kind of thing. They have not broken. Do you think polls like this convince a growing number of Republicans worried about their own survival?
Not yet, but I think as soon as they smell blood in the water, I think the sharks will be out because they don't like this guy. They're afraid of this guy, and they're afraid of getting primaried, and they're afraid of getting death threats on their office telephones and texts. But I think when they see blood in the water, I think it'll turn.
Before we go back to the calls, I'm going to allow you the pleasure of reading that text in yellow because it's a pretty significant one. Do you have that on your screen?
Trump 1.0
had anonymous texter.
Had a lot of checks and balances, and now my husband, who voted for him, is so upset that this is not what he voted for. He keeps saying how there are no checks and balances by the Republicans. He says that they don't grow a backbone. He will never vote Republican again. Well, that is a good point because Lisa Murkowski, she's shown some backbone, spoken out against him. She voted to impeach him. She's obviously a Republican from Alaska. A couple of the other ones you mentioned, Chuck Grassley, but it's rare. It's rare. And but on the other hand, I think if they're going to lose in 2026, I hope it happens before then. I do think if this keeps going,
they got to start separating themselves.
Well, because when they see that he's failing, I don't think they're going to go down with the ship. Maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene will, but I don't see it. Do you?
I don't know. I hope you're right. I don't know. Noah Newton, hi.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I wish we would talk more about the actual individuals in this administration who are carrying out these policies. The Stephen Millers of the world, if you will. And I don't know much about anything. I don't know these people's names, but I'm so sick of hearing the T word and not the name of his henchmen and henchwomen who are actually, invoking these heinous policies, these disgusting acts against humanity and against citizenship. So I would just love to hear them talk about more. Maybe we could go after them a little bit in the news.
I like that too. And Stephen Miller, by the way, you picked, I don't know if you're reading Marjorie's mind. If you were to say to Marjorie, pick the most heinous person in the United States of America, Noah, it wouldn't take her a second to come up with one.
You know how they say everything goes back to high school, Noah? I think things went south for him in high school, and he's never
when
quite gotten over it.
When he was campaigning for president of the school.
Yeah, they couldn't stand him back in his... where was he in high school? Some fancy high school in...
California, was it? I'm not sure.
West Hollywood or some...
Wasn't he campaigning against the Latino... what's the superintendent of the school? I don't mean superintendent of the school system. The guy who took care of the school. I believe that's great.
He was some right winger back in high school, and everybody hated him back then. You look at him now, you think something is not right. Then there's Pam Bondi. She's the attorney general, and I think we knew what her stripes were when she was in Florida as the attorney general.
Election denier.
Not only is she an election denier, but she was going to investigate Trump University, for which she was fined $25 million for running a fraudulent university. And then when she got a check from him, whoops, she changed her mind. So I think we saw her stripes then. And that is one of the things, again, you hate to wish people get their comeuppance. But, I would love to see these people get their comeuppance because she knows better.
Look what happened to almost everybody who was loyal to him in his first administration. Now, a lot of them got pardoned, obviously, lost their law. Look at Rudy Giuliani, probably the most sycophantic of all the people, totally ruined financially, his license being taken away. Look at this guy. I mean, it's incredible. We got to take a break.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're talking about the fact that it seems as though lots of Americans have caught on This is not what they were hoping to get out of the Trump administration. They just wanted, cheaper eggs, cheaper groceries, a better economy, not all this lunacy and chaos. What do you think? Trump's sinking in the polls. Worst ever for the president at this stage of his career in 80 years. Give us a call or text, 877-301-8970, 877-301-8970.
The Japanese pianist Hiromi is famous for her virtuoso playing and for jubilant tunes that leave you smiling.
I was a happy kid and I was very curious kid. My mom always told me I was like a curious George.
That curiosity fuels her ever-evolving sound. She tells us all about her new album next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com. And the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. Commemorating 250 years of history, independence, and innovation since the American Revolution. Learn more at massachusetts250.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday and Friday. Governor Healy joins us at the library on May 9th. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, on the 13th. If you're just tuning in, it's 100 days of Donald Trump's second term. There are a whole bunch of polls. We're talking about them and how you feel about them. By the way, the CNN poll just apparently came out today. And while his overall approval rating is at 41%, strongly approve is just 22%. That's a pretty incredible number. 877-301-8970.
Here's a text from Adam from New Hampshire. He's mad at us because he thinks that we are not representing both sides equally, and so we should be defunded. We may be defunded soon at the rate things are going.
What are we not
doing the
equally?
thing, Adam, and I want to say is that this is different. I've been a reporter all my life, and I've been on the radio a long time. Mitt Romney runs against Barack Obama, right? It's a small government, low tax, Republican view, traditional Republican view versus Democratic big government kind of view. You talk about those sides, but the difference is now these are illegalities. It's not like somebody's policy. We have 34 felonies. We know that civilly liable for being a sexual abuser. But the things he's doing are illegal. He's ignoring all these court orders, and eventually I hope he pays for that. He's doing things like defunding USAID. You may not care about USAID, but I think you should give them some notice so little children aren't starving to death within a month or two of you making these notices.
Well, can I respond to Adam, too?
I mean, there's not a legitimate side here.
But you're acting as if you're responding to Adam by suggesting, well, since there's not equivalency, we've mentioned the pathetic state of the Democrats. What'd you drop?
Nothing.
We've mentioned the pathetic state of the Democrats regularly. They're 27% approval. We talked a lot about, after the story came out in the Wall Street Journal, about the cognitive state of Joe. So with all fairness, you're not listening. You're just...
Well, it's not policy versus policy. It's illegality versus legality.
Yeah, but you're not giving us enough credit. We're calling out what we see.
Okay.
One is trying to destroy democracy. One is wildly unpopular and without ideas, with the exception of the Democrats, with the exception of Ocasio-Cortez and Sanders. You're not hearing a lot of policy prescriptions. You're hearing essentially criticism of Trump.
But I guess my point is, it would be hard for me to defend the person who, for example, says it's okay for all those hundreds of people to beat those cops to within inches of their lives.
I think you're giving this guy far too much time.
Well, because he's a constant texter, and I want to.
Okay, well, call the show, Adam. Call right now, actually. Tina in Harvard, welcome to the show. Hi, Tina.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Wanted to tell you a story about, I was at a work conference just this past week.
Yeah.
There were about 2,000 people there.
Wow.
Industry doesn't matter, but I'd say over half of the people live in Florida. The conference was held in Florida.
Oh, no.
And they asked the crowd, with all their opinions on the screen for everyone to see, what was the one thing that kept them awake at night. And of all the answers flying across the screen, the most popular word everybody put down was Trump or dump. And they were, let's just say, a little uncomfortable that was it. They were expecting work issues.
Wow, and that's in Florida and people from Florida, because Florida is a pretty Trumpy state, right?
Is. That's right.
Well,
that's right.
There you go.
Well, you sound jubilant, Tina. It was probably the best conference you ever went to, right? Exactly.
It was, aside from some of the dumpster issues, but
Tina, thank you for the call and thanks for the update on the conference. 877-301-8970 is the number. You know what's also really heartening about this? I'm trying to atone for my sins of criticizing the American people for sort of blindly being loyal, if on the MAGA side, is a lot of these responses to the 5, 6, 7 major polls done around the 100-day thing require a significant level of detail of understanding of what's going on, not just sort of some, 10-mile high kind of perspective. We also have mentioned the impact of the first 100 days. This is an election in Canada today. The Conservative Party, which is very Trump-like, was leading by 25 points before the tariffs. As of the moment, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. If the polls hold, that 25% favor margin has evaporated, and the Liberals are set to win the election today. So we'll see by the end of the day, all because of Trump.
Here's some more of this stuff. 3 and 4 oppose reductions in federal funding for medical research. I mentioned 7 and 10 do not like his messing in these universities. 6 and 10 oppose shutting down the education department, cutting back on environmental regulations on oil and gas drilling, and freezing foreign aid. That's USAID, that provides food and health services to people in poor countries. So people, we've said this a million times, that the Democrats' policies are much more popular, but they're carrying them out when it comes to health care.
Well, their messaging is also atrocious. Yeah. I mean, by the way, even though this may have hurt him, how often every day do you hear from Donald Trump? 5 times?
Constantly.
Nonstop? Yeah. How often do you hear from Joe Biden and his people? I mean, the other thing, I don't know, I think it was CNN they were talking about this week, and I saw it somewhere, is that one of the other things that Trump is doing, in addition to his own omnipresence, is he urges his cabinet members, who echo his policies, to be out nonstop. You hear them all the time. How often did you hear from a cabinet member in the Biden administration? I'm sure there are times I can't think of them.
I don't know, but I did see the Secretary of Treasury on with Martha Raddatz yesterday.
How was that?
I think he was really bad.
Really?
Yeah, he looked nervous.
Almost got in a fist fight with Musk. Did you hear that when he was in the Oval Office?
Everybody hates Musk. We know that now.
When Trump was in the office with the Prime Minister of Italy, for whom he has great affection, apparently. I wonder why. Apparently, the screaming between Musk and the Secretary of the Treasury in the hall was so loud that you could hear it in the Oval Office.
So did you read Drudge this morning? The Drudge Report is a great news aggregator. We know that Elon Musk has 14 children that we know of. They were speculating it could be as many as 100.
Our team is really on fire today.
100.
This caller before said we should talk more about individual people. Stephen Miller is Marjorie's number one. Here's a little sound from that high school campaign I told you about. He's running for school president or something at Santa Monica High School.
On the anti-janitor platform.
Here's little Stephen Miller. Here he is.
Am I the only one who is sick and tired of being told to pick up my trash? And we have plenty of janitors who are paid to do it for us.
Do you believe this? He's a 17-year-old kid. Am I the only one who is sick and tired of being told to pick up my trash? We have plenty of janitors who I think were Latino, if I remember correctly, who are paid to do this for us.
So at lunchtime at the cafeteria, he'd walk over toward the barrels and just drop everything on the floor. That's what he would do, and wait for the janitor to come pick it up. Oh, my God. Only kidding.
Okay.
Eric the Whistler, thank you for calling.
Eric.
Oh, hi, Eric.
Competitive Whistler, Eric in Arlington. Hi there, Eric. What's up?
Hello.
Hello.
So, I'm calling not to whistle this time.
Good.
I'm calling not to praise Caesar, but to bury him.
Exactly.
No, I'm calling because I don't pay much attention to these kind of polls, because the only polls that matter to the Republicans in Congress who are still, solidly behind him are the polls of likely Republican primary voters. Because those are the ones that those are the only ones that mean anything to them. And I think a poll of them would show that they're still wildly in favor of Trump.
Well, if I may interrupt you, Eric, independents who lean Republican are not nearly as enamored of Trump as they were on Election Day, not even close. So that's that's some indication.
But the independents in general are not the Republican primary voters.
Well, a lot of them are, actually. Primary voters. I'm sorry. Only some states like ours allows you to vote in any primary you want. That's right. Go ahead.
Right. And then, getting primaried apparently is the biggest fear for all of these Republicans, more of a fear than losing democracy.
Yeah, Eric, I think that's a decent point, even though there are, these numbers, and it's very early, are suggesting in the midterms, even some of the reddest districts are not nearly as red, so that their fear, I think, will extend not just to primary time, but to finals time as well. We shall see. Eric, thanks for your analysis. Appreciate it.
But don't you think that matters much more to the House than to the Senate?
Of course. Yeah.
And the Senate is not quite as
the likelihood of the Senate turning
wacky.
Democratic is very small because of the numbers of seats and how vulnerable they are. But the House is a whole different kettle of fish. What is it, 218 to? It's like a 6 or 7 vote margin, which means that if 4 or 5 votes switched, they would take control. I mean, the significance of that, by the way, doesn't mean that the Democrats could get anything done. But if one house was in the Democratic hands come January of 2027, that'd be the end of the affirmative agenda, other than that which he could do by executive order, which is not nearly as much as a lot of the people in this country think. So that's a pretty critical election. Let me just say one thing about that.
Yeah.
That is still 600 days away, or 600 and some days away. So there's a lot of doing that can be done in that period of time. Eric, thanks for the call.
Someone is texting something that's been mentioned over and over again. The promise of bringing all these manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. is that manufacturing is mostly automated now. The technology exists, and the idea of it's going to be back to the 50s. That's not going to happen. And so much of Trump's perspective is stuck in that time. It's odd. Anyway.
And by the way, a decent number of the manufacturing facilities that have announced since, quote, Liberation Day, when he announced the tariffs, that they're coming back, had already announced plans to return to the United States long before. Okay,
we are moving on right now because we're going to talk up next to Evan Horowitz. Am I on the right page?
You are on the right page.
Yeah, I think so. Well, this is anyway, we're going to talk with Evan
We
Horowitz.
are talking to him.
And
Trust
we're going
me,
to talk
we
with
are.
him about the state of the economy nationwide and right here in Massachusetts. He is from Tufts. He's an expert on all this stuff. He is next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, 3-time U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky will retire from Boston University in high style, literally, in a celebration atop Boston University's iconic structure known as the Jenga Building. He joins us for a preview of the lofty farewell and to share some of his poetry. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Now on view, Van Gogh, the Rouland Family Portraits, featuring Van Gogh's portraits of the Rouland family and the deep bonds of friendship behind them. More at mfa.org. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, Friday as well. Governor Healy joins us for an hour on May 9th. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, joins us for an hour at the library, both of them on May 13th. So last week, Marjorie successfully, how would I put this, badgered me into talking about the woes of modern parenting, the drama and intrigue of the second Karen Reid trial. So as I promised on air on Friday, today it's my turn to dictate coverage. Marjorie. State budgets.
State budget.
No, not just that. That's not fair. State budgets, personal budgets, the economy. Joined now in Studio 3 by somebody who actually knows something about them, unlike us, Evan Horowitz. He's the executive director of the Center for State Policy Analysis at Tufts University's Tisch College. He's been looking at the economic impact of Trump's chaos on things like everyday personal economy, to the economy of state and city budgets, and beyond. Evan, it's great to see you. Welcome back.
Oh, it's good to be here. I'm glad to be part of your revenge plan.
So, Evan, before we get to the state budget here in Massachusetts, where everyone's waiting in bated breath.
Well, they should, actually. They should.
We are, I think, in a little trouble, but we'll...
A little?
Yeah, a lot, I guess. But before we get to how much trouble we are in Massachusetts, let's talk big picture. I mean, the state of the economy nationwide we're chaotic, I guess, is the...
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's going to get worse from here. I think people aren't seeing it or feeling it, but there's a pervasive sense that it's coming, right? There are somehow ships in the ocean that are not... or missing ships in the ocean that should be on their way full of stuff that we want to buy that aren't going to arrive here. There are companies that should be investing that aren't investing because they don't know where to build or how to build, and that these effects are going to hit. They're going to hit hard over the next few months, and the likelihood of a recession probably better than 50-50.
And what does it mean? I mean, if people are having a hard time now, for example, one story this weekend that really set me back on my heels is that the number of people who are using buy now, pay later plans is up to buy groceries,
not
for
everyday
major
items.
things, is up dramatically. What's the difference for the average consumer, the average person living here or elsewhere, if we're, quote, in a technical recession as opposed to just being in some economic mess?
So you don't want to put too much emphasis on that distinction. You're right. An economic mess is bad. A recession would be worse. I think the thing you would worry about is jobs, right? We have had a really good job market now for 5 years. And then we had, COVID was the cause of and before that for years and years. So the last time we had like a long slog of a recession where people couldn't find jobs and unemployment went to 5-6%. It's been a long time, but that's when things start to get bad. You lose a job you don't know where your income's going to come from, and that hasn't happened yet. And having uncertainty, that is not the same thing as that.
China owns a lot of our debt. Is that correct?
They invest a lot in treasuries, yeah.
Okay, so could they make things worse if they chose to, if this tariff war thing is not resolved? And as we discussed last week, you all know this, Trump says there are ongoing talks. The Chinese government says it's fake news. There are no discussions at all. Could they make matters worse here?
I mean, I guess they could. It's way down on my list of things to worry about. They have lots of other ways to make things worse.
That. Well, what's on high on your list of what to worry about?
I mean, they could, for example, and they are talking about limiting our access to like rare earths. These are minerals that we need for lots of manufacturing, and we can't get them, and we can't build things that we care about, like batteries. And so, yes, China has a lot of leverage. So does the EU. So does every country in the world that we're fighting with. They have stuff that we want. That's the basis of the trade deficit is really all these countries offer us things that we want, and we give them money for those things. That's not terrible. It's not terrible that we can give them money and they give us stuff that we want. And what we're saying is, let's stop that. That's bad.
And the reason you even mention that is because what Trump says for years and years and years is the alleged reason, his reasons for this tariffing is because of the trade deficits with which he is obsessed.
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, what's the impact of all these federal jobs? I mean, it's not huge, but there's got to be some impact.
It's got to be some impact, but even that, it's really hard to know. Like, a lot of these jobs are not gone. They're just kind of in limbo. There are court cases. Are they going to get reinstated? Who's going to get reinstated? How many? And then lots of people kind of getting severance. So if you're getting severance, you're not on the unemployment. You don't get counted as unemployed, but that will roll onto it.
Okay.
And I think, if you're worried about the job market, probably it's not this month, it's not next month. These things are going to unfold slowly. And in some ways, people are not used to that. I'm not used to that. COVID happened, like in a flash. In a month, we had like the worst economy we've ever had, and unemployment went up and everybody stayed home. But it's been 15 years longer since we had a kind of slow moving breakdown. And that's closer to what we're looking at now. And I think we're sort of unfamiliar with that.
Okay, so what are the implications for Massachusetts?
But one last thing, though. If Trump were to end this back and forth today.
On tariffs, you mean?
Yeah, and stopped threatening Jerome Powell. He sort of has stopped threatening Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed. I mean, could he pull this back?
So he could make it a lot less bad. I think at this point, some of it's baked in. There are ships that just aren't going to come. There are people who don't trust us anymore because he's volatile, and you can't make him less volatile.
Yeah.
Like, he's always going to be volatile. But he could certainly make it less bad and say, you know what? I had this incredible dream. I had a vision. I was all wrong about trade, and I'm going to eliminate these tariffs. Then, most of the problems just go away. There were not big structural problems in the global economy or the U.S. economy that have thrust us into this position. It really is Trump's trade war that is driving us down this path.
Okay, Massachusetts. What kind of mess are we in, assuming that there's not a dramatic reversal in the White House?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things going on. One is we're always in a mess when the U.S. economy is in a mess, right? We get most of our tax revenue from sales and income. If the economy doesn't go well, people buy less, that's less sales tax. They earn less money, that's less income tax, and we're in trouble. On top of which, so that's like the first part. Second part is increasingly our tax system relies on capital gains. We get a lot of money from capital gains taxes, both through the income tax and through the millionaire's tax. Guess what happens when the stock market crashes? Capital gains disappear, right? They go to zero. Well, not quite zero, but they really just evaporate. And so a whole big portion of our tax base just won't happen or might not happen in FY26. And, the market's down 10%. It was for a minute down 20%. It could easily be back down 20%. The odds that it's going to be up, I think, basically non-existent. Like, what are the odds that the market ends this year up? Like, it's not going to happen. So we're facing that problem. And then the third thing is usually when we get into some kind of economic crisis, we in Massachusetts are insulated by some key industries, higher ed, healthcare. But right now, higher ed is under frontal assault from the administration. So the kinds of things that insulate us are actually at risk of accelerating problems here in Massachusetts. So we're very vulnerable.
Well, to add one thing to your list, though, that one of the major insulators is not just that, it's federal revenue. And we are on the verge of losing a ton of federal dollars. What explain to people, for example, in healthcare, which is a huge part of the budget, what could happen should these cut? We're going to see the Trump budget, by the way, I think in a matter of days, at least his proposed budget. What could happen to the Massachusetts budget, specifically Mass Health, which is what we call Medicaid?
Yeah, and that is the place to think about it, right? We get about $15 billion in federal assistance for Mass Health. That's
out of a total budget of what?
About $60 billion.
So that's a quarter of our budget.
Something like a quarter of our budget is just federal dollars for Medicaid.
Okay.
It's the second biggest stream of money behind the income tax, bigger than the sales tax. We really rely on that money. And, even just a small cut to what we get from the feds, our reimbursement rate, creates a giant hole in Mass Health. Right? $500 million, $1 billion hole is a massive hole, and the kind of hole we can't fill. So yes, that is a big threat. And I think it's easy to kind of think broadly about grants and federal money, but Medicaid is the pot that matters. Mass Health is the pot that matters, and we need that money.
And by the way, we want to remember the thing we've discussed with John Gruber about 3,000 times, head of the economics department at MIT. For those who labor under the notion, well, Medicaid just helps poor people, and we don't care about poor people in the 2020s. We care about others. Your grandmother's in a nursing home, and all these kinds of. It's a huge portion of the payments.
I think it's almost a third, maybe higher.
Or seniors?
No, of people in the state who rely on Mass Health in some way. It's kids, it's seniors.
So what happens?
Well, that's the big question. Nobody has a plan. Nobody kind of wants to stare this in the face and say, oh my goodness, we've got to deal with it. Now, I understand on the Mass Health side, because having a plan doesn't help. We're just going to have to make cuts to the program, fill in temporarily what we can, but there's no making up for it. I will say on the budget,
Wait a minute. When you say there's no making up for it, though, does that mean that nursing homes will have to close, or that there'll be no child care for people or health care for poor people?
So I think what we would start doing is probably paring back on some benefits, like kind of dental benefits and things that have gotten added over the years. We'll say, oh, that stuff seemed affordable for a while.
Let's move on from that. Good.
I'm not saying this is a good idea, but you start paring the least additions, and also it'll depend on the reimbursements. But I think. The bigger issue I've been hammering is sort of we're in the middle of this budget process now, right? The House put out a budget, or the Ways and Means, and then Senate's going to do it next. But it's based on a revenue estimate that is just outdated.
Well, can we talk about that? You used the word baffling in some story I read. Even I think I'm just going to say, even I understood this, and then I'm going to say I'm going to explain it. He's going to say I'm wrong.
I would never say that.
Yes, you make a face. So the unemployment rate that is projected in these budget forecasts, at least I think you say, is even lower than it currently is before the worst impacts of federal cuts happen. So the budget estimates are built in essence on a house of cards.
So this is specifically for unemployment insurance estimates. Yeah. And I think I may have said baffling, absurd, indefensible. Any of these seem right. Yes, it's based on the assumption that we're going to have 3.7% unemployment for the next 5 years. We already don't have 3.7% unemployment. We're above 4.3, something like that. And the odds that it's going down and then staying, no, it's not going to happen. And even with that assumption, it still doesn't balance. So, yeah, that side of it, the unemployment insurance side, needs a fix, needs it badly, is going to insolvency and going there fast.
Okay, so both the governor has told us, and told everybody, I shouldn't say just us, and the Speaker of the House has told everybody who asks, no new taxes. So that's off the table. There is what is it? How big is the rainy day fund? $8 billion?
$8 or $9 billion, yeah.
So how much of that is accessible? This is a fund into which money is put aside for a rainy day, like we're going to experience, maybe a rainy year or two. How much of that is legally able to be committed to filling holes created by the feds, and how much wisely should be committed?
So I don't know that there are legal restrictions. I think you have wide latitude to use. It's a savings account. That's what it's for. We have this money, and we should use it if we need it. Wisely, you want to prepare for a couple of years, and you never really want to get to zero, but you probably have. You need to use $3 billion in a year. Go for it. And I do worry that lawmakers learned the wrong lesson from the COVID crisis, which was we don't need any of it. Everybody said the sky was falling, and then we got all this federal money, and the sky didn't fall, and we just actually refilled our rainy day account, so maybe we don't have to use it. I hope they don't learn that lesson, because as I say, it's not that kind of crisis. We're not getting big federal aid like we did that time. We are going to have to fill gaps, and it's good to have a big stabilization fund. So you get several $1 billion this year, several $1 billion the year after if you need it.
So do the feds have the ability, when I say feds, I mean Trump, his Office of Management and Budget, and all the budgeteers in Washington, do they have the ability to target blue states much more dramatically than they do red?
I wish I could say no, but I think and fear the answer is yes. We don't really know, because why would anybody do this? Nobody's ever done this, right? But we could easily get into a situation where we have a recession and the feds are thinking, oh, we want to help Americans, but only certain Americans. We want to help people in red states more than blue states, and we're going to direct aid one way or the other. Now, I haven't heard people talking about this, so it's not.
I have. Nancy Gertner wrote a piece about it saying she thought that they were targeting, like the Social Security agencies that closed were in Boston, San Francisco, Chicago. She thought that was suspicious.
Yeah, I think that is a real risk. Another reason that I think Massachusetts is more vulnerable to this recession than we have been to prior recessions, and we need to sort of be especially careful.
Because
the feds could say, oh, we're going to provide aid, but only to other places and not as much to you. Like, sound fiscal policy in the face of recession has kept us out of a proper depression for 100 years, right? Every time things go bad, the feds, they don't always have the best policies, but they say, oh, how can we help? We know states are limited. They can't run a deficit, right? They have to balance their budgets. We'll step in and help. And generally they do, but that's much less certain this time.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to say there's a lot of talk, too, from individual Republicans, senators, and congresspeople having Elon Musk's number. Of course, he's kind of fallen out of favor in the last couple of weeks, but they can call, like Katie Britt, the senator from Alabama, calling to beg for her research.
Well, now they call, what's his name, Russell Vogt, the guy who's head of OMB, who apparently is the architect of all this stuff.
And, the president may like her, and she may get what she wants.
We're talking to Evan Horowitz, who's head of the Center for State Policy Analysis at Tufts University's Tisch College. You wrote a piece in the Globe about the wealth effect, and it went beyond what you talked about a minute ago with capital gains. Explain what the other danger there is.
Yeah, so I'll start with what you mentioned before, which is sort of more lower-income folks seem to be using credit to buy groceries, basic stuff. Lower and middle-income folks have been pulling back on their consumption for a couple of years, and the American economy has been driven chiefly by higher-income folks spending money. Right, the top 10% of income earners are covering about 50% of purchases, or were 50% of retail spend. That's incredible as of last year. So part of what's powering that is their sense of their wealth, not just their income, but the stock market was very, very strong. Housing prices were very, very high, and they felt like, oh, you know what? I've got reserves. I've got extra money. I can spend it. Once the stock market starts to decline, as it has, or becomes really volatile, they say, wait a minute, I'm earning the same amount of income. Wealthy people, exactly. I'm earning the same amount of income, but I don't have the same cushion. I don't have the same wealth. I can't afford to splurge on a vacation or get the same kind of car. And that has its own ripple effect where just because the stock market went down, even before there are job losses, people can pull back on their spending and lead us into recession.
I've asked the governor on our show a number of times, and she answers ways I would answer if I were her too. She campaigned on $1 billion tax cut. The variation on the one that Baker proposed, didn't get it. Democrats gave it to her. it was a major campaign theme, and she talks about affordability. I've asked her, in the wake of the dangers of what is likely to come, cuts from the feds, if she regrets the $1 billion in tax cuts and if that money would be better spent to fill holes in the budget. And if she, of course, I don't mean making it sound like I'm critical, it's her position. She, of course, says, no, this is the right decision. It's targeted to seniors and this and that, whatever. Is she right?
Well, think about the parts of it. The biggest part of it was child tax credit.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason to regret that. Families are going to need that money in the face of recession.
She raised the level and took the cap off. Used to be only apply to 2 kids max. Now, if you have 100 kids, like Elon Musk does, you could use it for all 100 kids.
I thought about that, but really, he's really in a good position there. That's right. The second big piece is the estate tax. You might regret that. Like, we could use money from people who die in Massachusetts with large estates, but there were some problems with the tax that needed to be filled. But there are other parts that I should think she'd regret. Like, why did we cut taxes on short-term capital gains? I don't know. Well, why are we cutting taxes for day traders? That seems like a crazy thing to do. We could use that money. It was a priority of the business community for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it passed and nobody talks about it. Nobody says like, oh, thank God we got this. That's why the economy's so strong. It never made sense.
So, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say, first of all, I just want to say, Jim has been so in his element during this segment. An opportunity to talk with you about
So what
taxes.
do you think of the Karen Reed defense, Evan Horowitz?
I'm a little lost, I must admit. I'm not sure. Capital gains, all
That's
this
just
kind of
self-deprecating
stuff. But anyway, it's been a wonderful segment for
I'm very
Jim.
happy. Thank you, Margaret.
And for me, I enjoy it too.
The two of you really should get together. You should go have dinner tonight.
Are we
and continue
happy?
this conversation.
Go ahead, Margaret.
But I just wanted to say, she has said when we've had her on and asked her about this, that she wants to caution people that we don't have the money to make up for this shortfall, and that, as you said before, services may have to be cut drastically to make, because we have to balance the budget here,
yes,
don't we?
Every year we have to balance the budget, and we have some money to fill in short-term holes. If there's a recession, we think it's a year or two, and it's causing a shortfall, we still want to fund the Student Opportunity Act. We can tap the rainy day fund for that if we have to, but for permanent problems, the feds change Medicaid reimbursement. Can we permanently fill that hole? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And we're going to have reduced revenue. So, we're facing a real problem, and there isn't a clear way out of it. Now, what I've been saying in terms of let's reassess our tax estimates for this budget is, how about before we get to the point where we have to pare back, let's not expand anything. Let's build a budget where we don't rely on revenue that we're really unlikely to get before we start talking about having to pare back. That's where we are right now.
Why are they doing that?
Because they don't have answers yet, so obviously they're using favorable predictions so they can put off hard decisions. I mean,
that's also partly my fault. Like, I'm one of these people who they ask in December, come in and tell us how much money we're going to get. And I'm, me and a bunch of other people. And we told them, this is how much we think. And now I feel differently. But the world's changed, so things change.
We only have a minute left. Last time we saw you, and Evan puts out these fabulous analyses of the ballot questions before that are really useful to people. We have had back and forth on this show, just like there is in the general public, between the Attorney General and Diana DeZaglia, the auditor, as to whether or not there's a constitutional violation of separation of powers. The auditor released 150 pages to us a few days ago, about a week or so ago, and we're going to actually do a show on this fairly soon. Do you have a view on the separation of powers issue in 45 seconds?
Yes. First, I'll say, this is the ballot question that keeps on giving. Most of these things you vote, you forget about, you don't even remember. Right to repair. This one will not go away, and it's wonderful, and it's fun to watch.
30 seconds.
All the nerds think it's a violation of the separation of powers.
You do?
Every nerd I talk to says, yeah, this is a problem.
In total?
In total, people who are, expert on governance
that
stuff.
She can't audit
anything. No, she could audit stuff, but the stuff she wants to audit, she can't audit. So she could audit procurement processes in the legislature if the legislature wants to cooperate, but she can't get involved in votes or committee assignments, stuff like that.
Well, she hasn't made that.
She's looked at committee assignments.
Not the request she's written to the legislature.
Yes. Anyway, she's treading on very thin ice.
You should come. We're going to do a show on this in the near future. You should come back.
I'm always happy to talk.
Evan, it's great to see you. Be well, Evan Horowitz.
And Jim, as I said, is
apparently we're having dinner. So.
Yes, that's right. Could not be more thrilled. Thank you very much, Evan Horowitz, who's Executive Director of the Center for State Policy Analysis at Tufts University's Tisch College. Thank you very much, Evan.
Thanks, Mark.
Coming up after the noontime news, we're going to talk with Ilan Stavans of Amherst College. We're going to talk to him about the meaning of dignity as it appears America loses some of it with every o'clock. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Lexus Broadway in Boston, presenting Kimberly Akimbo, the new musical by Boston native David Lanzier-Bear and composer Janine Tesori, May 6th to 18th at the Emerson Colonial Theater. More at lexusbroadwayinboston.com. Roadshow heads to the Maryland Zoo to see a menagerie of dazzling treasures in Baltimore. Guess the top find on a new episode of Antiques Roadshow. Tonight at 8 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. As Donald Trump divides America, he's apparently uniting Mexico. First up this hour, we'll talk with Amherst College's Ilan Stavans about what that looks like for our neighbors south of the border, plus Ilan's reflections on the legacy of the Catholic Church's first Latin American pope.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then it's a Boston icon, the groundbreaking Reverend Liz Walker. She was the first black woman to co-anchor a local newscast before becoming the pastor of Roxbury's Presbyterian Church a little over a decade ago. Now, she's out with a new memoir titled No One Left Alone. She'll join to talk about lessons learned throughout her remarkable career. All that and two more things ahead. Second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Trump administration is approaching its first 100 days, and it's in a standoff with judges who've sounded the alarm about the circumvention of due process to crack down on illegal immigration. In defense of the president's orders, today, Border Czar Tom Homan addressed the recent arrest of a Wisconsin judge who's accused of illegally helping a Mexican national in her court evade immigration enforcement officers.
What I said from day one, you can sit aside and watch, you can argue against us all you want and protest all you want, but when you cross that line, I've said this 1,000 times, when you cross that line to impediment or knowingly harboring, concealing an illegal alien from ICE, you will be prosecuted.
The White House is facing lawsuits alleging the government deported people, including most recently a family with mixed legal status, without allowing them due process. Today, it said it intended to continue with large-scale operations. The White House announced the recent arrests of hundreds of people in Colorado Springs and Miami. NPR's Joel Rose looks at polls indicating how the public feels about Trump's immigration policies.
There's a CBS YouGov poll that shows 56% of Americans approve of President Trump's program to deport immigrants in the country illegally. Another Washington Post ABC Ipsos poll, though, found that only 46% now approve of Trump's handling of immigration, 53% disapprove.
Joel Rose reporting. Canadian voters to the polls selecting a prime minister. NPR's Jackie Northam reports much of the race has been centered on which candidate can best handle President Trump and his policies.
The two main contenders in Canada's federal election are current Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party, Mark Carney, and the head of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre. But a third figure, President Trump, has had an oversized impact on the election. Many Canadians are outraged about Trump's tariffs and threats to make the country the 51st state. That's hurt Conservative leader Poilievre, who's seen by many as Trump-light because of his rhetoric and messaging. That, in turn, has helped energize the elections and help give Carney and the Liberals a substantial boost in the polls. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
Now that Pope Francis has been laid to rest, cardinals are preparing to select his successor. From Rome, NPR's Jason DeRose reports a conclave begins May 7th.
A papal conclave must begin between 15 and 20 days after the death of the Pope. There are currently 135 cardinals eligible to vote. The vast majority were appointed by Pope Francis. It's the most geographically diverse group in history, with more representatives from the Americas, Africa, and Asia than ever before. When the cardinals convene on May 7th, the electors will be sequestered in the Sistine Chapel and a nearby guest house. They'll take multiple votes each day until one candidate emerges with a 2/3 majority. Jason DeRose, NPR News, Rome.
This is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Red Line's Ashmont branch is going out of service tonight. As GBH's Jeremy Siegel reports, the closure is expected to last through Wednesday.
The shutdown is happening so crews can complete maintenance on the so-called Ashmont Diamond, where Red Line trains turn around at the end of the line. As usual, the MBTA is offering free shuttle buses in place of subway service, but the T is warning that the buses could mean longer trips. The agency says riders can also use the Fairmount commuter rail line and the Route 18 bus, both of which will be free during the shutdown. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News, 89.7.
Last week, Senator Ed Markey and Representatives Ayanna Pressley and Jim McGovern detailed what they call the harrowing living conditions of detained Tufts and Columbia students after visiting the Louisiana Detention Center. But in a statement to the Harvard Crimson, ICE officials called their claims unequivocally false. The three Massachusetts lawmakers went to Louisiana specifically to see Rumesa Ozturk and Maham Khalil and to call for their immediate release. They said that the students were being housed in appalling conditions. ICE agents detained Ozturk, a Tufts PhD student and Fulbright scholar, in March after her visa was revoked by the State Department. Khalil, a Columbia student and Palestine activist, was also detained by ICE agents in March. Red Sox continue their road trip tomorrow, opening a series with the Toronto Blue Jays in Toronto. 69 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with its Name Your Price tool, a way to see coverage options based on a driver's budget. Learn more at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We will return to the Boston Public Library tomorrow. We'll be there Wednesday and Friday as well. Programming note, on May 9th, we're going to be joined at the library by Governor Maura Healey. And on May 13th, we'll be joined also at the library by Attorney General Andrea Campbell. Hello again, Jim.
You love saying programming note, don't
I do.
You
It
brighten
makes me feel
up, your
very
face
efficient.
gets all full
like I know what's
and...
going on ahead, down the road, even though I don't.
In any case, we're joined on Zoom by Ilan Stavans. He's professor of humanities and Latin American and Latino culture at Amherst College. His latest book is Lamentations of, wish me luck, Nezahualcóyotl.
Yes.
Is that I got it?
You did.
Ilan, I am so happy. Good to see you. How have you been?
I am thrilled to be with both of you.
We're thrilled to be with you, too.
So thank you very much for joining us as usual. So, when we talk to you, Ilan, you pick a word.
I love that.
And the word today is dignity. But we want to play a little sound of cellist Yo-Yo Ma, who was speaking at Symphony Hall earlier this month on April 11th when he was performing works by the Russian composer Dmitri Shostakovich. Here he is.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would love to dedicate this concert to anyone who has experienced loss of health, loss of loved ones, and above all, loss of dignity.
I was in the room for that. I was just going to say, I didn't know we had that part of the sound. The room exploded. It was just a beautiful moment.
Why did you choose dignity for us today?
Marjorie, I think dignity has disappeared from the dictionary of this administration. They don't seem to know what the word is about. Dignity is the sense of pride that each and every one of us is worth something, that we are not numbers or photographs on a database. And what this administration does is just dump us into a big collectives, the immigrants or the menace that comes from here and there. I think that one of the key elements of a dictatorship is to forget what the dignity of individuals are all about. And I am thrilled that Yo-Yo Ma mentioned that, and I think we must remember that word and put it at the front of our dictionary, even if it starts with D.
You know, focusing on one part of Trump's agenda is how he is treating undocumented people in this country. One of the things I love about you picking a word is you never describe to us in advance what you exactly mean. And so we get to interpret our own way. Here's how I interpret it, is that so many undocumented people in this country are a lifeblood of almost everything we depend upon, can't live their lives. We've had educators in who say they're not sending their kids to schools. We've had doctors on the show who's saying that undocumented people are not showing up for medical appointments. And we're only, a week away from Cinco de Mayo, and their celebrations being canceled all over the country for fear that there'll be an opportunity for Tom Homan to bring his ICE troops in and snatch people who've done nothing wrong other than come to this country to escape violence or for some sort of hope. So that's a huge piece of this, no?
It's a huge piece, Jim. In Philadelphia, in Chicago, the celebrations for the Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May, are being canceled because of fear that this will become a magnet for ICE to come and arrest people and send them back. And if we can't have joy together, if people need to be in the shadows, secretly hiding, then this is not the society all of us who came here from other parts of the world and all of us who were born here want. This is a society that is pushing away from the freedom and the drive of individuals to be themselves. You know, Cinco de Mayo is a crucial date in Mexican history. It is the moment in which the Mexican army defeated the invading French arriving. And it also celebrates, by connection, the moment in which the Mexican-American War was fought and lost by Mexico, and a large portion of the territory ended up becoming part for $15 million of the United States in what is today the Southwest. It is kind of the same vision in the middle of the 19th century of what Trump wants to do with Greenland or wants to do with Canada, take over other places. And it is also the same vision of depriving people from the capacity just to be themselves, just to enjoy. Cinco de Mayo is one of the most festive moments in the Latino calendar, and it is a shame, it is embarrassing that people cannot come out.
So, Ilan Stavans, we have, your new president doesn't like Kristi Noem's ads. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico is doing the same thing that the Canadians and the Europeans and others are doing. She is taking advantage of the fact that Trump is the ogre, is the menace. There is a great sense of pride and of dignity and of nationalism in Mexico. There have been a series of ads that have aired in Mexican television portraying immigrants as vermin that are coming from the south into the north. And she established that this is not allowed. She is passing a law limiting the airing of this. And I think she's very shrewd. I love the fact that Claudia Sheinbaum is using reason, is using logic, and at the same time is really connecting with people, whereas Trump has a very low approval rating in the United States. The New York Times Siena poll put it lower than 45%. Yep. In Mexico, she is 80 and above. Yeah. Mexicans love this president, the first woman president and the first Jewish president. It's just quite a feast.
Well, you know, it's not just there. As soon as Trump said that Zelensky was supported by, I think, single digits of people in Ukraine. His numbers went from, I think, 57 to 67%. We mentioned a few minutes ago the elections in Canada today. The Conservatives were leading by 25 points until so-called Liberation Day, Tariff Day. Now the Liberals are expected to win. And then you have Sheinbaum exploding. And we should be more detailed. Kristi Noem, who's the head of Homeland Security, she's the one who killed her dog, is intentionally... And a goat. She is doing these commercials. They actually play, I don't know if they play on some stations in Boston, but the ones that were most objectionable to President Sheinbaum in Mexico include the words from her, "We will hunt you down," is what she said. Talking about migrants, sort of like Trump's announcement in 2015, you're responsible for crime, drugs, and that sort of thing. And she stood up. And you know what's most interesting to me, Ilan Stavans, is Sheinbaum brilliantly has worked Trump around things like tariffs by giving in to him on a bunch of things that don't matter that much. Yep. But obviously she decided there was a line that she had to draw to protect her dignity and the dignity of her people. And this is the line she drew.
That's the line of dignity. She is not she's not ready for Americans to be able to use Mexican television to undignify what a Mexican is all about. People don't come to the United States because they are criminals. They are coming to the United States because they want a better life. And only when the situation in Latin America, in Mexico, other parts of the world changes, and it might begin to change soon, that immigration will stop. I take pride in what Sheinbaum is doing, and I think that though I always resist the idea that the government will interfere with what can or cannot be shown on a television. This is also free speech. It is very important to set a line when you are vilifying an entire nation or when you are vilifying its individuals and you are now not allowing them the dignity that they have.
So what about her relationship with Donald Trump? We talked a few weeks ago about how she was managing to walk that fine line. Is she risking that, or any indication that he's less fond of her?
You know, we're waiting in Mexico, Marjorie, for the final decision of the new tariffs that are going to come. She is very cautious. She keeps on telling, she has a news hour every morning called Mañanera.
Oh, really?
Every morning she talks to the press and she talks to the people and she says what we need to be doing is ser cautelosos, to be cautious, to be cool. She knows that what his strategy is chaos. His strategy is impulse. His strategy is not to think about what the next step is going to be. And she, as a scientist, is always emphasizing that the best way to deal with him is not to rush into a decision, but to think about this. I hats off, Mexican hats off for her.
Can we to say this is an assault on dignity is in this case is not even close to strong enough. We have a judge, actually two judges, who've been arrested this week because they didn't want ICE agents to invade their courthouses. They were free to do whatever they wanted outside the buildings. And even worse, if you can make a comparison, at minimum, three young kids, a 4-year-old with cancer, a 7-year-old, both from same mother who was deported, and in another case, a 2-year-old whose mother was deported. All three are U.S. citizens. All three of the children are U.S. citizens, all deported. While we were on the air talking to you, CNN is saying that Trump's response to this, when asked this morning about the deportation of children who are U.S. citizens, he's not even repeating, as far as I could tell, Tom Homan's lie that, the mothers had an opportunity to have them stay here. They chose to take them with them. There's no substantiation of that. Trump doesn't even echo that. Trump says nothing will ever be perfect. That is his response to the deportation of people, kids, one of whom is quite ill, who were citizens
to Honduras
of this country.
I don't imagine, I'm not sure what the medical situation is in Honduras, but I probably is not as good as the high-tech hospitals in the United States.
It certainly is not. And just to say that we're not perfect and thus we're making any mistake and are justifying that mistake because we don't want to distinguish who is an American and who is not, separating mothers from children and children who have metastatic cancer who need to get medical treatment in the United States. Honduras, El Salvador are not known as places where you can get the type of treatment. And even if they were known as such, they are American citizens. They need to be here, to be treated here. I think this makes me think, Jim, of the way I descend from Ashkenazi Jews and Holocaust victims. And victims in the Holocaust were deprived of names and of dignity, and they were just given numbers. And even when asked, Hitler and others would say, well, they are just Jews, and Jews are taking over, and Jews should be eliminated. People are not just immigrants. They are human beings. They have lives. They love, they hate, they dream, they eat, and they have to be seen as such. There are different generations here, the mothers and the children.
You know, in about 10 minutes, we're going to talk. I don't know if you knew Liz Walker when she was the legendary anchor woman here at WBZ. She then became a reverend, and she's written a wonderful book we're going to talk to her about in 10 minutes. And it's about dealing with trauma and a way she helped devise to deal with it. And I want to ask you about trauma and the loss of dignity that so many in this country have suffered. Let's assume that Trump were to do some sort of reversal on some of these issues. He says that, for example, that Abrego Garcia will bring him back from El Salvador. Right. He allegedly, over the weekend, they reversed temporarily the policies about suspension of student visas. We're not going to arrest judges anymore. We're not going to deport Latina kids who are citizens, on and on. It isn't like the trauma and fear that he is put into people's bodies and souls just disappears. This is like an ongoing horror that doesn't change as policy changes.
This is like a little game. Okay, we send them back and let's move forward. But people have that trauma in their DNA now. They feel the suffering. They feel the fear. You know, going back to one of the topics that you asked me at the very beginning, one of the key words during the dirty war in Argentina was the desaparecidos, those members of society that all of a sudden disappeared from the streets, from the dinner table, from the classroom, from the kitchen. Some of them never to be seen again, others who came back with big trauma, and it took years. Yeah. It might be that in the future we will need also a Truth and Reconciliation Commission just to go through the trauma that we are all collectively and individually experiencing, and to reckon with the terrible impact that this has on all of us, on those that are raising their voice, but particularly on those that are being desaparecidos, disappeared.
We're talking with Ilan Stavans from Amherst College. You know, you just mentioned the dirty war in Argentina, which gives me an opportunity to ask about the Pope Francis, who just died. Funeral was over the weekend. Lots of people liked him, but lots of people think he really, I don't know if disgraced himself is too strong a word, but did not certainly remain silent when he was in Argentina as an archbishop there. Tell us about his role in the dirty war.
His role in the dirty war was quite contradictory, Marjorie. He is a man that, on the one hand, as archbishop, initiated an effort to have dialogue with other religious groups, particularly with the Jewish community. Argentina has the largest Jewish community in Latin America, one that has suffered anti-Semitism for a long time. Remember also that Latin America, Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, were places where Nazis, former Nazis from the Second World War, had escaped. They lived in the same neighborhood sometimes where Jewish survivors of Auschwitz and other camps existed. And the church had helped those Nazis find our route to Argentina and other places. And so Archbishop Bergoglio, his name at that time, reached out to the Jewish community and established a dialogue with the Muslim community as well that was crucial in change things. On the other hand, he didn't stand up to the junta in the way he should have. And people in Argentina have a mixed feeling toward him. They see him as a hero, but they see him also as coming short.
Do you think that's why he never returned to Argentina once he was elevated to the papacy?
It's incredible that he traveled to so many countries. What is it? 50, 60, and yet he never went back to Argentina. But you know, Jim, he was a great soccer fan. He watched soccer games every Sunday. I went to the Vatican, and there are shirts signed by Messi and others that he felt very close to Argentina and to a certain part, the spirit of Argentina.
But why do you think he didn't go back? Do you think that is the reason?
I think that he had mixed feelings about it. You know, there are many Argentine figures. Jorge Luis Borges, probably the most important writer of Argentina in the 20th century, also left at the very end of his life. He went to Geneva. He wanted to be buried in Geneva, not in Argentina. It's Argentinians are incredible people. They are also known in Latin America as having a very big ego. They could export ego to the rest of us Latin Americans. And I think Pope Francis had a very difficult relationship with some of the Argentine politicians, Cristina and others, and just never actually figured out how to go back, though at least physically. I am sure that he kept on going back spiritually and in his dreams time and time again.
You know, they were talking in this piece in Time magazine about his being the first Latin American pope, and, you know, how for a while he was all in on liberation theology that, you know, talks about critiques of capitalism. But then he was kind of backed away from that a little bit and went back to it. And it mentioned, this isn't really about the Latin America, but it's just something that I didn't hear mentioned over the weekend. It was mentioned in this Time magazine piece. One of the first things that the Pope wrote was this Joy of the Gospel, when he talked about the evils of inequality and poverty. But he also talked in there, in the first couple of pages of that book, he must have mentioned joy, the joy that his faith brought him, about 40 times. Joyful this, joy that, joyful that. And instead of seeing him as always embracing the poor, he's embracing the tragedies, embracing the migrants, nobody kind of talked about the upside and he did have that joy. And I wish in eulogizing him, people had more talked about the joy he found in his faith. It was very powerful.
Even people, many of us who are not Christians, Catholics, found in him an empathetic figure, a partner, a leader, an admirable icon. And I think that humility, that joy, even when he came short, he could have opened the door to women to become priests.
Yeah,
he could have a very different approach to LGBT. Yes, we're not perfect. He wasn't perfect, but he was himself. And it's very hard in a corporation like the Catholic Church to remain yourself after 13 years, an absolutely admirable figure, a joyful figure.
Yeah, I want to return to what you said about Argentinians and ego. Aidan, our colleague, after you said that, found a New York Times interview that a Mexican journalist did with Pope Francis. And here's what Francis said.
I never heard this.
Nor had I. He says, do you know how this is the Pope Francis speaking. Do you know how an Argentine kills himself? When the interviewer, the journalist, said no, the Pope replied, he climbs up on his own ego and then throws himself off. That's a pretty good line.
I never heard that before, you guys. Thank you so much. That was a great line.
Ilan Stavans, it's wonderful to see you as always. Thanks so much.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
We have been speaking with Ilan Stavans. He is a professor of humanities and Latin American and Latino culture at Amherst College. His latest book, Jim, you want to say this for me?
No, I want you to say it, Marjorie.
Lamentations of Nezahualcóyotl tool.
How close?
I'm not.
Very
close.
good. Very good.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you,
just
Robert.
you're
He's
being
so
a nice
kind,
guy.
Ilan is.
Look up the Lamentations part. You'll get that
actually
right.
great. It's
N-E-Z.
poems. It's beautiful.
poems, and it's
Beautiful.
great translations of poems. But it's a difficult word to say. Anyway, coming up after a quick break, the Reverend Liz Walker is here to discuss her memoir, "No One Left Alone: A Story of How Community Helps Us Heal." It's going to be great to talk to Liz Walker. You'll see to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
After college, deaf students are less likely to find jobs in the sciences, healthcare, or teaching, and government grants that aim to change that were just ended by the Trump administration.
I definitely feel like if things had been different, I wouldn't be feeling so lost and unsure about my future.
I'm Ari Shapiro. The uncertainty ahead for students on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And the Umbrella Arts Center, presenting The Spitfire Grill, the uplifting folk musical based on the beloved film, now through May 18th in Concord. Tickets and information at theumbrellarts.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The governor will be with us for an hour on May 9th at the library. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will be with us for an hour at the library on May 13th. We're going to start this next segment listening to an historic first. On WBZ Channel 4, this is back in April 5th, 1980. I wasn't born then, but I've heard a lot about it. When a newcomer to the scene made history. Here's Liz Walker anchoring the news in Boston for the first time, the first black woman to do that.
Welcome to Boston and New England.
I've got to get used to a few of the pronunciations.
Right, Lobel and Burbank are the only two you have to worry about right now.
I've been practicing them, but there's some others that I have to learn.
Okay.
But I think the East Coast is going to be good for me. National Guardsmen are on the scene tonight at the rumbling volcano in Washington state. The troops were called out today to assist local officials who are trying to deal with the huge crowds. The spectators have been traveling to Mount St. Helens during the last several days since headed toward a major eruption.
Of course, that woman became a legend here in the city, anchoring the news on BZ, becoming minister at the Roxbury Presbyterian Church in 2014. One of the leaders behind the Embrace, on and on and on. She joins us today in Studio 3 because she's just out with a terrific new memoir, No One Left Alone, a story of how community helps us heal. She has a number of events coming up, April 29th at BU's Memorial Chapel, May 3rd at Rozzy Bound Coop, Rosendale Square, and May 4th, Bethel AME Church, Jamaica Plain. More info at LizWalkerBooks.com. Again, LizWalkerBooks.com. Reverend Liz Walker, it's so good to see you. Welcome.
It is great to see the two of you.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. But you know, when Jim was playing that clip, I think you and Jack Williams, Bob Lobel, Joyce Haywick, you know, you guys were like... Burbank,
Barry
that's
Burbank,
right. Barry
yeah.
Burbank, that's right. I mean, the superstars of the evening news. Every day, you probably couldn't have gone anywhere in Boston without somebody pulling you over and asking you for an autograph.
Back in the day.
Back in the day,
yeah.
I bet.
You know, and time goes so fast.
I know.
You may not have noticed that. But
I have noticed it. I have noticed. So tell people how it happened, though. You were on the news for all those years, highly successful, and then you became a minister and went to preach.
You know, people ask me that all the time, and I'm still trying to process the whole thing. But I did take a trip to South Sudan in 2001 with Ray and Gloria Hammond, who are very much still active in this community. Yeah. And they described what was going on inside me with South Sudan as a call to ministry. So they suggested I go to divinity school, to seminary, and I did. I was so enamored with them, and I followed them. And I think that I was also just wanting to do something more. You know how you report on the news and you're subjective and you're removed, and pretty soon what happened to me was maybe I can do something to change some of these things, or at least take part in that.
A couple of weeks ago, Phil Johnson, a great long time. They served in the Cox administration, Clinton administration, died, and there was a memorial service at UMass Boston, and the first speaker was Ray Hammond, and I'll tell you, it just really brought down the house.
Yeah.
He is just other. When they said to you, "There's a calling," did that feel right?
It felt.
What did it
well,
feel?
the first thing, Jim. For me, it was like, who are you to tell somebody else they're called? I mean, what kind of people do that? I was so blown away by their faith, I think. I watched it. And I think also being in an environment where there was so much need in South Sudan, and there still is, as of course you know that.
Yes.
I think that kind of made me feel like, well, there's something to it. But it really played out of my respect and love for both Ray and Gloria.
Well, this book is a wonderful book, No One Left Alone. Talks about a time when, and I remember this time, wasn't that long ago, 2010, when there were so many young people, I think 70 young black kids gunned down in the city of Boston. One of them was a young man named Corey Johnson. So tell us about him and how this led you to No One Left Alone.
Well, first of all, to get from journalism to the pulpit was a journey, but I ended up from Ray and Gloria's church going to Roxbury Presbyterian Church.
I should have put that in first.
Well,
sorry.
no, but the only reason I say that is because I went there for temporary reasons. I went there, they said, well, you just stand in the pulpit for a few months. But I fell in love with this neighborhood, which I had covered as a reporter, but that's a different perspective.
Yeah.
And when I got to the church, one of the first things I realized was the pain in the church. Corey Johnson was a member of the church, and he had been killed a year before I got there on the streets, not far from the church. His murder had not been solved. He was a part of a rash of shootings, and his family was just really struggling. Of course they would be, as were many other families in the community, from unsolved deaths or solved deaths. It doesn't even matter how, the fact that they had such deep losses. Corey wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't a
Boston Latin.
Right. He wasn't
Great family.
an at-risk kid. He just lived in the neighborhood. But, as I got to know the family and tried to know more about Corey and just tried to figure out how I could help the family. Churches are supposed to help people like that. But what were we doing? So that's what led us to this Can We Talk program. Maybe we could be there, not to fix people, but just be there to listen to people in their pain.
Describe the Can We Talk program.
Can We Talk is I call it a spiritually inspired, community-based, clinically supported gathering where people come anonymously to just talk about their pain and suffering, to tell stories about their lives. Sort of a cross between AA and old, what I call old black church testimony, where we'll just gather around you and just listen and create a safe space. When you have a loss, any kind of loss, you're given a certain amount of time in this culture, and then you have to get over it and move on. At least that's what we say. But that's not realistic, and that's not true, especially violence.
Well, you talk about not being able to grieve alone. I mean, you think of the legend. Talk about major moments in social science. Bowling Alone with Bob Putnam. Grieving alone is essentially what so many people have done, and particularly in that community. I mean, we've done a lot of work with Clementina Cherry, who I know you know from Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. Another young man, her son killed, who was going to an anti-violence thing around Christmas time, and all of a sudden, his life taken, and she's dedicated her life to that sort of a thing. But expand on the whole notion of the inability of one to grieve alone and to.
Well, we kind of think, Jim, we kind of think that we're supposed to grieve alone, that it's something internal and that's the only way we can get through it and nobody else wants to hear it. So let me just keep this to myself. But that's not healthy. I don't think it's healthy in any way. And if you look back in ancient history, cultures have always found a way to grieve together, certainly in African cultures and in other cultures where people know that we need each other, we belong to each other. So it's that kind of awakening for our community. Funerals are, community, but there's something else that's needed after that. And so the idea of grieving alone can be dangerous because you hold stuff in, you don't talk about stuff, you blame yourself, you have guilt. Speaking your pain can really help you get to healing and ultimately to joy. I think that a lot of us just live our lives holding our stuff in. How are you doing? I'm fine. Well, maybe not, So what we're saying is let's talk about it. And that way we can relieve ourselves of some of the pain or find a way through. We're not trying to say we end the pain, because we don't.
We're talking to the Reverend Liz Walker. The book is No One Left Alone. I also thought, too, at the beginning of your book, you talked about how there's this kind of collective trauma and collective chronic trauma in certain neighborhoods. And in Boston, it's in Roxbury, Mattapan, and Dorchester, because like this young man that we don't know why he was killed or what happened, like I said before, Boston Latin, he wanted to go into hip-hop, charismatic, good-looking kid, just out for a partying, and all of a sudden the gunfire opens. But you saw this a lot. Stephen Odom, that young boy killed for they have no idea reason, or they hit the wrong person or something. It was like, the whole sections of Boston, you didn't know if you could walk from here to the drugstore without somebody shooting you by accident. So that was another big theme of the collective kind of neighborhood fear.
And in neighborhoods where people are afraid or don't trust each other or certainly don't trust police, you're going to see that kind of thing. But I would argue, Marjorie, that we're all in some kind of traumatic era right now.
Amen.
Yeah.
Are we
That's
ever?
a good point.
And I don't want to make it try to compare the death of my child to political trauma, but it's all stuff that hits us deep inside when we're afraid, uncertain, and anxious. And we don't know how to fix it. We don't know how to make ourselves feel better. So, and we see so much stuff,
Yeah.
I looked down for 1 second. I lost my concentration. And honest to God, this is true. And all of a sudden I said, that's Liz Walker. I just forgot. We're talking to Reverend Liz Walker. You're going to read. We asked you if you'd read a little piece of your... I have
to get my glasses.
Are you willing to do that?
I'm willing to do that.
What are you reading for us, Reverend?
Just a little bit from the introduction, little bit. So you tell me what. This is very short.
Just go right ahead.
Okay. This is an answer to Marjorie's point she just made. Collective grief is a political, social, and spiritual dilemma that blocks our nation's capacity to heal. We have become a traumatized nation, one unwilling or unable to grieve. Too much of what we see all around us, racial injustice, gun violence, escalating suicides among our young people, opiate addictions, and environmental turmoil, are becoming accepted as normal. The traumatic events that surround us demand a response if we are to maintain our humanity.
Yeah.
You mentioned that so many people keep it inside. I thought I knew a lot about you from afar because I wouldn't say I was quite a student of Liz Walker, but obviously, you were a huge presence in this community.
Huge presence. As a quick aside, you probably don't remember this, but I was so mortified.
What happened?
When you first got to BZ, I had to call you. You said, call up Liz Walker, ask her how tall she is.
Oh my God.
Harold,
and did you do it?
Well, you probably don't remember. I called like 15 times before I think you finally answered the phone.
Are you going to read something else before I ask you a question?
Oh, no, I'm
I have a question. What I learned about you, it's some of these stories about not dealing with pain. Part of what you learned in this, I think, in this Can We Talk process is about pain in you.
Absolutely.
That you hadn't dealt with. And there's so much about you, but when you talk about your father, your mother dies at childbirth, which I didn't know, and your father, Reverend Charles Walker, decides to send your older brother to one school, the predominantly black school. Was it called Dunbar? Was that the name? Dunbar.
He was in Dunbar Junior High School, right?
And he sends you to West Side. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, West Side Junior High.
Tell the experience. By the way, I've read this. It's only like a half a page.
Little Rock.
I've read so many times. Tell us about your experience with little white girl Mary.
Oh my God! I'm in the 7th grade. Now remember, this is right around the time my father dies.
Yeah.
So I'm going through my own grief, and of course, back in the day, we didn't process. There was no trauma. You just went to the funeral and moved on. And then I go to this school, Westside Junior High, which was being desegregated, and it was such a hostile environment. I can think about it and get kind of jumpy. And I went into my 7th grade math class. I hated math anyway, Mrs. Sorrell's class. And I was the only black in the class, or at least only black I remember. There might have been another student in there. And this white girl says, she hated me. I didn't even know she hated me because she'd never said anything to me. One day, she tells her friend, Gary Burris, to kick me. And she says, kick that ends A, And he did. He reached out to kick me, and I was just shocked. And I threw my book satchel at him, whatever. We ended up in the principal's office, and we were all suspended. But I never got to say to the principal or to the adults, they never even asked me what happened. I was just defending myself. It was a traumatic moment for me. That school was full of those kinds of incidents. You hear about the 1957 desegregation of Central, but every year after that, they were trying to desegregate schools, and people were it was abusive. It was horrible because it was only a few black kids who were, and nobody was prepared for it, I guess. I'm trying to be kinder about that time in my life, but I still have a lot of pain about it.
But did the Can We Talk program that you created for others help you?
It helped me define what I'd gone through because I just put it away. But then I still have issues. I don't go to Little Rock. I had a friend who died maybe 20 years ago, and that was the last time I went. But I just went in and out. My parents are all gone, but I never went back. I just found it a very rough place, and still do. So I think you carry stuff. Now, did it stop me? I went on with my career, but it was inside me. And it certainly kept me less than whole.
So it was not an easy childhood, losing your mother, obviously, at birth, and then your father when you were still pretty young. So what was the Liz Walker trajectory? Because you really became a big star
Well,
pretty fast.
I think that was part of my struggle. It was just, let's just get through this. Let's just do it. And I was successful. So when I say trauma, I'm not saying that people aren't learning to live. You survive trauma. You have whole nations. You go to South Sudan, they've been surviving trauma for generations. But you're less than whole is what I'm saying. So I figured it out. I figured out a way to do what I had to do. But it was only where do you get the chance to think about your life? You know what I mean? Do you get a time? Do you sit here and talk about, let's reflect on things that have happened? Maybe you do on this radio show because you have such a special...
No, Jim is not a very
Not very self-aware. I should be honest.
Jim,
she is, actually. No, she is.
Well, more than you, but that's not saying much. Yeah.
But so this is just offering that opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, but I was just going to say...
I love the way you guys work this out.
We haven't worked it out at all. This is pretty obvious, but go ahead.
But Can We Talk is kind of taken off now. What are you, like in 15
I just heard this week, I'm kind of stepping back because I wrote the book and I'm pseudo-retired, but we have 20 sites. We just opened a site up in Washington, D.C. at a church, and we're going to be working with Howard University's psychology department, which I'm very excited about, to actually, do some research around this and to support around this and do it for their students. That's the goal.
Wait. I want to. When you mentioned psychoanalyze, and you mentioned, I think you didn't use the word shrink before, but clinical types, they're there if people need help after. This is not like a clinical session.
This is not.
This is a speak and listen.
This is a speak and listen.
So I'm glad you said Howard, and I know there's a component here that's Y connected. This can be replicated not just in a church.
No.
Right. Well, play with that a little bit.
The reason we put it in a church is because those are we believe that's an institution that has some kind of trust in a community. Even if you don't go to church, you pass it, you pretty much know that. I hope there's some trust there, and you have people there who are willing to do this kind of long-term work, which we call abiding, to be the community around the pain. But Howard University is going to do it. Now they're going to work through their theology department and try to mix it. And we haven't done it yet. We're doing it at the Y because kids come to the Y.
Here.
The Y, two YMCAs, one in Roxbury and one in Dorchester, are working with us. And we do that every week in one of those Ys. And the kids come on Friday evening and they have their kind of iteration.
Kids.
Yes, these are teenagers, but they're just talking, not quite like we do it. Ours is more like AA, but theirs is conversations about what's going on.
So how does it work? The kids come in, and is there a topic or is there a person?
There's a facilitator. There's pizza. That's the first thing.
That's good, yeah.
And we start with a meal as well. And the kids come in and talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what the key of this is trust and consistency. So we're here every week at either the Y in Roxbury or the Y in Dorchester. We have wonderful young facilitators, and they lead these conversations. Same thing with the church. We say, we're here. We have music. We have art. We do all kinds of things. Not quite like a church service. Open mic, let's say open mic, and then you just speak your truth.
Reverend Walker, I'm going to read. We're getting a ton of these. Let me just read one. Ellen, who's watching on YouTube, it's a healing balm to see and hear Liz Walker loved her for many decades. There are a mountain of those coming in.
But I was going to mention, at the end of your book, you talk about how this really helped Corey Johnson's family. I guess his half-brother was half in, half out, but it made a big difference, the talking.
I wish I had brought Deborah with me, his mom, who talks about how her healing happened. Some of it for the family is finding new meaning. You know, when you lose your child, you lose your sense of God, you lose your sense of everything. And she has found meaning in the program of helping other people through her story, which is the basic essence of what Can We Talk is about. She tells this story, which I just love. Recently, the last few weeks, she went to some symposium, not a Can We Talk, and a woman whose son had killed someone came up to her, and the woman said to her, I don't think I can talk to you because my son murdered someone and your son was murdered. And Deborah said that she asked the woman, can I hug you? And for her, this was the biggest thing in her life because, of course, when her son was killed, she didn't know who killed him. So everybody, but now she can walk across that divide and tell the woman that we're both in pain and I'm sorry for your pain. That's the essence of what Can We Talk is.
So, Reverend Liz Walker, when we talk about replication, and you've talked about it doesn't have to be in a church, and you mentioned some other settings, and we mentioned in passing that there's a lot of trauma. We hear it on the radio every day with callers, and I'm sure everybody else hears it too, trauma across this land on lots of different fronts. Could you devise a variation on Can We Talk?
I would love to.
Think about it.
I think, Jim, thank you.
Would it work? I mean, would it...
I think the only thing that the church brings that I'm not sure can be replicated outside often is the commitment to stay. It's not easy work.
Commitment to
stay with it.
To stay with it.
To stay. Okay, I have trauma. I'm going to come join your team just to listen, and then I'm inspired or motivated to be a part now. So that means I'm going to commit to come every month and listen to other people. That takes commitment. Who wants to sit there and listen to you on your worst day? Well, you learn that does something for all of us to hear you, and it does something for you, and then you become committed.
How hard was this? I mean, you were pretty good at everything, I should say. How hard was this?
This was the hardest thing I've ever done, because it's such a big story, and I was like, and organizing it. I get a twitch when I think about it, but it was, it took me a long time to get it together.
How'd you feel about exposing yourself?
People ask me that, but that wasn't the hard part for me because transparency is kind of part of who I am now, and I'm free. So it's not like I'm telling you something that I would like. Obviously, I don't care anymore. And as you grow older, you become unfiltered anyway, so you might as well just kind of direct that thing,
Yeah. But the other thing I love, this was a mistake I made as a reporter because I believe the cops, when you call about someone that had been killed, they'd say so-and-so known to police. The cops would say that. And lots of times they weren't known to police at all. And then you'd have this person on the news as like somehow they deserve whatever they got. And when you see like this young man and so many other people, they were just living their lives, going about their lives.
Right.
And they weren't known to police.
If they were known to police, it's hard not to be known to police when you live in a neighborhood that's got a lot of issues where you get stopped for a lot of things. Yeah, there's a lot of unfairness and injustice in this work. And Corey was a good kid. He wasn't perfect. He got in trouble.
Yeah.
But he was a good kid. He didn't deserve to die, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reverend Walker, last couple of minutes we have, you also you talk about the inequity of grief. Could you spend a minute on that?
I just think that we've been some of us have carried more grief historically and have never tended to it again. When I was a little girl, I remember the Emmett Till story, and I remember looking in a magazine, and at school somebody brought Jet magazine, and we were looking at the picture, which we shouldn't have been doing. But being so shocked by this picture of this bloated, distorted body in a casket, and that stayed with me all my life. And I never told my parents about it, but that then became a part of my story. It's just weird. It's just those things that happen. Does everybody do that? No. But some of us do that. So I think black people are more prone to that because of the things when George Floyd got killed. Well, we all felt that because, no, I may not have a drinking problem. I may not be out in the street. I may not have, but I still am black. And because of the color of my skin, I feel more susceptible to that kind of injustice. When I drop, that's grief that I carry. When I pass by a police stop, here in even Boston, a police is questioning a person in the car and they're of color. I worry about that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that may not be the truth, but that's a perception that stays with me and affects my interior. Now, when I saw that little girl at Tufts University ICE people sweep down on her, and she wasn't doing anything, and they take her away, that got me. I think that got all of us. So that's the kind of grief I'm talking about. But if you're of color, or if you're from a marginalized community, or if you wear a hijab or anything, you probably got more of that than others.
Before you go, on an up note, my daughter saw your son playing Aaron Burr in Hamilton, and she didn't know it was your kid until she came home raving about your kid and said he was
I used
brilliant.
to see him walk into the school in Brookline,
singing.
and then
Singing.
and then he's on the stage, Broadway. That was like the biggest job
That
ever.
was huge.
Oh yeah,
he's still an actor. He's still in New York. He's in a play out in San Diego now. But thank you for remembering Nick Walker. Remember that name.
Nick Walker, Aaron Burns. That was
Hey,
great.
Reverend Liz Walker, your book is terrific and important, and it's so good to see you. Thank you
are
so
both
much.
the best.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very
Really
much for
appreciate
being
it.
with us. We've been speaking with the Reverend Liz Walker, the first.
Don't take my book either.
The first black woman to host the evening news in Boston, a minister now and out with a new memoir, No One Left Alone, a story of how community helps us heal. And it is a great book about collective healing, about one family story, about Liz Walker. You're really going to like it. She has a number of book events around the city. Go to LizWalkerBooks.com. That's LizWalkerBooks.com for more info. Next up, two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Support for our programs comes from you and the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, outlier author Malcolm Gladwell, and geopolitical economist Pippa Malmgren. BostonSpeakers.org. And Furniture Consignment Gallery, committed to the circular economy for over 30 years. Current inventory is available to view in their showrooms in Burlington, Natick, Hanover, and Plymouth. More at FurnitureConsignment.com.
Solar panels are often sold as a cost-saving alternative to the electric grid, but that's not always the case.
I'm paying over $500 more than what I used to pay. Why am I paying all this?
The details are in the fine print.
They told me, oh, you're paying for your production. So I stopped paying them. They turned off the system, but I'm being sued.
I'm Jennifer McKim. We take a closer look at this California-based solar company suing over 400 Massachusetts residents. Today on GBH's All Things Considered.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We're streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. It's time for two more things. Marjorie, what's your thing?
Well, you go first because I haven't timed mine. I don't want to keep up again. You go ahead.
Well, I haven't either, but I'm going to go. So did you see the hostage video yesterday morning on CBS Sunday Morning? First question from the reporter about the attire of the hostage. Here it is.
What's going on with this sweatshirt? Well, you can see I've worn this one for a while. Do you remember how you got the cut here? No.
Okay, amazing how much the hostage looked just like Bill Belichick. In fact, it was Bill Belichick, or a good a pod person pretending to be Bill Belichick. Here's more. The reporter says, how did it feel to be let go by the Patriots? Bill Belichick. It was a mutual decision. But Kraft said you were fired. It was a mutual decision. But the best or the worst part was this. The reporter asked the following question, and the response was not from Belichick, but from some person off to the side. Here it is.
Not talking about this.
No?
No.
The reporter had essentially asked, how did you two meet? And the person speaking who said, he's not talking about this, was Belichick's 24-year-old girlfriend, or as Belichick calls her, his creative muse, Jordan Hudson. Again, she interrupts and says, he's not talking about this. Apparently, he is not, even though she has said, or they've posted on social media, that they met on a plane. Belichick has also made clear that all communications, do you know this, Marjorie, at University of North Carolina, where he is now about to coach, must go through her. So, as I said, essentially a hostage situation, elder abuse, I don't know what it is. The only advice I can give was suggested by our lead producer, Jamie, who said, Bill, blink twice if you need help. And that really is the sense you got from this thing. Marjorie, take it away.
Okay, I don't know if I have time for this, but basically 60 Minutes is come into the crosshairs of Donald Trump.
We talked about it on Friday.
Yeah, $10 million lawsuit involving Kamala Harris. They've continued to go after him on Ukraine and Greenland. And now, because Paramount wants to do this deal, they're pressing 60 Minutes, taking away their individuality. Here's 60 Minutes Scott Pelley speaking of this at the end of last night's broadcast.
In tonight's Last Minute, a note on Bill Owens, who until this past week was executive producer of 60 Minutes. He was our boss. Bill was with CBS News nearly 40 years, 26 years at 60 Minutes. He covered the world, covered combat, the White House. His was a quest to open minds, not close them. If you've ever worked hard for a boss because you admired him, then you understand what we've enjoyed here. Bill resigned Tuesday. It was hard on him and hard on us, but he did it for us and you. Stories we pursued for 57 years are often controversial. Lately, the Israel-Gaza war and the Trump administration. Bill made sure they were accurate and fair. He was tough that way. But our parent company, Paramount, is trying to complete a merger. The Trump administration must approve it. Paramount began to supervise our content in new ways. None of our stories has been blocked, but Bill felt he lost the independence that honest journalism requires. No one here is happy about it, but in resigning, Bill proved one thing. He was the right person to lead 60 Minutes all along.
Good for him.
Good for you, Scott Pelley. Good for you for 60 Minutes. I hope you don't knuckle under. I hope Shari Redstone at Paramount does the right thing. Anyway, coming up right after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to check in on Ukraine with Boston's president of the Ukrainian Congress Committee. That's next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're going to talk to a New Hampshire man who came out of retirement to launch a humanitarian aid group in Ukraine.
And then back to Bill Belichick at 1:30.
Not talking about this.
Support the news you trust by donating your car, truck, or other used vehicle to our vehicle donation program. You'll have more space in the driveway this spring, and you may earn a tax advantage. Learn more at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Support for GBH comes from you and Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms. And Celebrity Series, presenting bassist Edgar Meyer, violinist Tessa Lark, and cellist Joshua Roman, live at Harvard's Sanders Theater on Friday, May 9th. Tickets at celebrityseries.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio's war wages in Ukraine over 3 years since Putin first invaded. We're taking time to check in with local voices. Vsevolod Petriv is one of them. He's the president of the Boston chapter of the Ukraine Congress Committee. We'll also talk to Brian Nolen, founder of New Hampshire-based aid group NH4 Ukraine.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then it was the most decisive thing said in a Bill Belichick interview maybe ever. And the former Patriots coach wasn't even the one to say it. We're not talking about this. That was a statement made off camera by his 24-year-old girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, during his profile interview on CBS Sunday Morning. Rounding out our Monday, phone and text lines are open. Yes, we are talking Bill Belichick and Jordan. That's next on the third hour of Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. As President Trump's 100th day in office approaches, his White House is emphasizing his actions to combat illegal immigration in the U.S. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports today the White House said state and local law enforcement will be a key part of deportations moving forward.
At a briefing, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed last week's Immigration and Customs Enforcement operation in Florida, Operation Tidal Wave. She said it resulted in the arrests of nearly 800 people in the U.S. illegally.
Operation Tidal Wave is a preview of what is to come around this country. Large-scale operations that employ our state and local enforcement partners to get criminal, illegal aliens off our streets.
Today, Trump is expected to sign 2 executive actions related to border security, including one that will target sanctuary cities, jurisdictions with laws that limit cooperation with immigration authorities. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News, the White House.
The president says Ukraine is open to giving up rights to the Black Sea Peninsula of Crimea, which Russia illegally annexed in 2014. But as NPR's Joanna Kissis tells us, Ukraine's leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, has made clear he will not concede the region in exchange for a quick peace deal pushed by the Trump administration.
Russia seized Crimea 11 years ago and then armed and assisted Kremlin-allied separatists in occupying parts of eastern Ukraine. Ukraine cannot legally recognize a Russian takeover without changing its constitution, which requires a referendum. Zelensky has said repeatedly that he will not recognize an occupied territory as part of Russia. Artem Chigoz, a member of Ukraine's parliament, is a Crimean Tatar, the indigenous people of Crimea. He told NPR that Russians persecute Crimean Tatars. President Trump and his team cannot ignore international law, he said. He cannot ignore the indigenous Crimean people. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
Millions of people in Spain and Portugal are facing disruptions from a massive power failure across the peninsula. The outage has severely affected transport and communications systems. The BBC's Danny Eberhard has more.
The operators of the electric networks are starting to restore power in some areas. So, for example, in Spain, they're saying that power is starting to be restored to parts of the north and the south. In southwest France, they say that the interruptions have stopped. Andorra was a brief disruption. So already there are plans to put these back into place. But the network operator in Spain is talking about 6 to 10 hours before services are resumed. And of course, at the moment, we do not know why this happened.
The BBC's Danny Eberhard. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Brookline Public Schools Superintendent Linus Galori has announced his resignation. Brookline News reports that during this morning's announcement, Galori, who became superintendent in 2021, will stay in his role until the end of June. The resignation comes during a challenging time for Brookline parents, educators, and school staff, as well as the school committee and the district's leaders, as that town faces a roughly $8 million budget gap for fiscal year 2026. Some school committee members say working with Galori has been challenging, citing lack of information sharing and transparency. The school committee says it'll start discussing the process for hiring an interim superintendent to take over the leadership of the district on July 1st. And when it comes to air quality, the metropolitan area of Boston, Worcester, and Providence is ranked 61 out of 228 metro areas. Boston.com reporting that when it comes to particle pollution, the Boston, Worcester, Providence region was 114th worst over a 24-hour period and 110th worst for annual particle pollution. The report goes on to say that those levels are better than they were back in the late 90s, thanks in part to the Clean Air Act, but those numbers have been on the rise over the past few years. Sunny mid-70s today, clear sky into the 40s overnight, mostly sunny. We could see 80 degrees tomorrow. Yes, 71 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library in Copley Square tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday, May 9th for Governor Maura Healey and May 13th for Attorney General Andrea Campbell. They'll both be at the Boston Public Library. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. Since Trump took office in January, he's embarked on this massive shift of global policy, perhaps none more profound than in Russia's savage war against Ukraine. You may recall that stunning Oval Office stunt in February with Ukrainian President Zelensky, leading to Trump's seeming complete public shift in support for the Ukrainians' fight for democracy and siding with his murderous friend, Vladimir Putin. In the weeks since, it's been a roller coaster, with U.S. officials pushing for a ceasefire at seemingly any cost for Ukraine, and then one day he's saying Russia doesn't want a deal. This morning he's saying that Zelensky has agreed to give up Crimea, which Zelensky says is not true. In any case, meanwhile, at the front lines, war wages on into its third year with thousands dead. We're joined now in Studio 3 for a conversation about the war and the future of Ukraine with Vsevolod Petriv. He's president of the Boston chapter of the Ukrainian Congress Committee. It's great to see you again, Vsevolod. Thanks for being here. Brian Nolen is the founder of New Hampshire for Ukraine, and it's an aid group. He just returned from a year-long stay delivering aid to the front lines. Brian, great to meet you. And Vsevolod, great to have you back. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you.
Great to be
thank
here.
you both for coming in. So let's start with you. As Jim said, we've been all back and forth all over the place. Where are we right now, do you think, in terms of getting some kind of peace agreement?
Difficult times, I would say. I'm sure people are looking forward to some sort of peace agreement if it can be found. But everybody's pretty skeptical of exactly what motivates our current administration in terms of what they envision as a peace agreement.
How is Trump viewed by the Ukrainian people?
At this point, often more as a clown. There was some initial hope. I have to admit, there was some initial hope when he was coming in. There was thoughts saying that, okay, we know what happened with Biden. There was always enough help, but not enough to really win. Now Trump says he can really do something.
Said he was going to fix it on day one, if you recall.
Sure. So maybe he's got something going. And then once he got going, it was like, you know.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Speaking with people on the ground over there, they didn't really know what to make of Trump the first term because, of course, the war wasn't going on then. When this blow-up at the White House happened, that really cemented people's opinion against him and also increased Zelensky's popularity.
From 57 to 67% overnight.
Oh, you mean it's not 4% like Trump mentioned?
I think what Brian says is true, is that Trump is also saying Zelensky's support back home was in single digits, and why don't they have an election? Because the policy in Ukraine is not have an election in times of war, obviously.
Exactly.
Well, Vsevolod, explain to people why Crimea matters so much, because I know that Zelensky said, no, that's not going to happen. What would that mean for Crimea if Russians were to get that permanently?
I mean, the Crimeans have been suffering heavily under the occupation. So that's one. Two, I think it's more the notion of giving territory to a bully. And so if you give him that, then why not give him something else? So my guess is they're just saying, no, stop at the Crimean.
It's just not just about Ukraine. Is Putin violated international law in doing this? And if he's rewarded for his violations of law, then it's incentive for other Putin-esque behavior.
Yes.
How did you get started in this aid effort in New Hampshire? What do you do for a living?
Well, this is my life nowadays.
What was your life?
I was semi-retired at the time. I had a commercial contracting business for many years.
Semi-retired?
And
You're awful young to be semi-retired.
Obviously you did well.
Genetics, okay.
And then I'm in my 60s.
Then what made you change course?
I think, like a lot of people, I was sickened watching what was unfolding on TV, and I'm a little bit of a World War II buff, and it reminded me so much of Nazi Germany invading Poland in 1939, and watching these poor villages being shelled relentlessly by Russia. So I didn't really know anything about Ukraine. I don't have any history, no relations over there. But I started reading up about the country, and it's not a wealthy country. Per capita income's like $7,000 a year or something like that. But watching these people lose everything, their home is everything out in the villages. So I I just had to get involved. Doing nothing was not an option.
So what did you first do?
So I donated, and then I decided to get involved. I started looking at Facebook groups, see where I could do the most good at that moment. At that moment, this is about 2 weeks after the war started, I booked a ticket to Poland. I rented a passenger van in Berlin, Germany. They were all sold out in Poland. Flew to Berlin, drove across Poland, got busy working at a large refugee center at the border, because that's when Kyiv was still under attack. So there was a big outflux of people. Millions of people were leaving Ukraine, and they needed a lot of help. It was a 1,500-bed refugee center. So we launched a GoFundMe, ended up raising about $70,000. So we bought almost everything they needed there at the refugee center. I came back, and then a month later, a friend of mine came with me back to Ukraine again, and we started going into Ukraine. And then by the fall of 2022, we ended up in Kharkiv, big city in the northeastern corner of the country, and that's my home away from home now. I just spent a year there. I have an apartment there. I bought a van. And we have a nice operation going now. We've made a lot of contacts in all specters of the society. We work with some military units to get access to the frontline villages. So basically, the way we work is we're a nonprofit. We get donations from people who care about Ukraine.
Of things or of cash?
No, mainly cash.
And then you buy things.
It's too expensive to transport things. It's not practical unless you're doing a large shipping container. So really, cash is the best way. Spend it in Ukraine, you get a huge bang for the buck. The hryvnia, the local currency, is now trading at about 42 to $1, and you can buy a lot for $1 over there. And we buy all wholesale goods. We go out to the frontline villages about twice a week. We bag up about 80 or 100 bags with some other aid. And I have a contact in the military. A military chaplain guides us to the villages.
The website I can see on your shirt is NH4, the number 4, nh4ukraine.org. Yep. Brian, I know you won't take this the wrong way, but for people who are concerned about donating to nonprofits, how do they know you're legit?
Well, we're an affiliate of a 501c3 that vets all our purchases, United Ukraine. All the information is on our donate page on the website. So basically the way it works is I buy everything we need over there once a month. I submit a reimbursement request with all the receipts. They go over all the receipts. It's all just...
So they can check out the website.
Yeah.
You know, Vsevolod, we've talked about this a lot on the air, even though not nearly as much as we should in the early parts of the war. And I try to imagine myself, if this was happening to us, and I felt that when we were on the evening news every night, everybody was saying important and supportive things about Ukrainians, and then it faded and faded and faded and faded. Starting with you and then with Brian, do the Ukrainian people feel that the people of the United States have abandoned them? Is it you don't want to say it, or you don't know the answer?
They feel they're nervous about the government.
A little closer to the mic.
They're nervous about the government, clearly. But those who have contacts with people here know that those people are still helping them.
How about you, Brian? What do you feel?
Yeah, I think they're just confused by what's going on. They can't make heads or tails of Trump. Who can nowadays, right? He shifts with the winds. It's like the last guy in the room is the one that influences on the way out. You know, he's got this clown Witkoff going over and
real estate guy.
Yeah, he couldn't even name. He was on Tucker Carlson. He couldn't even name the oblasts, the regions that Russia laid claim to. He knows nothing about Ukraine. He's getting played like a fiddle.
And he says, by the way, one of his quotes was, "I trust him."
Yeah.
Sort of like what did Bush say? I've seen his soul or whatever.
Into his eyes.
Looked in his eyes.
I do wonder. We speculate a lot about why Trump is so enamored of Putin, and people say it's because he's a strong man kind of thing. But do you think the Ukrainians have any insight that we're missing?
The strongman thing is an important feature. Just because I really think his worldview is that the world should be ruled by a few strong men sitting around a table, and he's going to be the brightest of the bulbs there, and he's going to be such a happy camper, and everybody else doesn't count. When you were talking about dignity earlier today, that dignity's not there. You know, everybody's to serve that table of people.
Okay.
From his point of view. But there was a second part, and I forgot what it was.
Well, so let's assume that strongman urge, Trump, leads him to total abandonment of Ukraine, cutting a deal that is totally on the terms of Putin. What happens to Ukraine without a deep well of support from the United States?
Yeah, you just brought the second point I was thinking. The second point is that Ukraine has become very dependent on the military support. And so there, when I said the government support, what people are afraid or fear is the weaponry will not be there. Without the weaponry, then everything else sort of falls to pieces. So you need the weaponry. So Ukraine has now started diversifying. They've got their own missiles going. They've got their own drone manufacturer working. They're working with Europe. So they're already, from the strategic point of view, widening their dependence or their support from looking at the U.S., who happen to have the best military stuff going.
That's the voice of Vsevolod Petriv. He's the president of the Boston chapter of Ukrainian Congress Committee. He's joined here by Brian Nolen, who is founder of New Hampshire for Ukraine.
Brian, I read in one of our producers spoke with you, and I think you said that some of the weaponry we were supplying had been built in 1973.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I really fault the Biden administration for not messaging this properly. People don't understand how the money is being spent. The military aid that we're giving them is primarily weapons that are approaching their expiration date.
Yeah.
We're out visiting an artillery unit near the front, and they had a huge pile of these metal cases that they shipped the artillery shells in from the U.S. So we took a couple as war trophies. I've got a pile of war trophies in my apartment in Kharkiv.
Get some in your box over there, too, I think.
Yeah, there we go. And so I looked at the casing, and it's manufactured 1973. That is a 50-year-old artillery shell. That's the lifespan of a shell. We can either pay Raytheon or some other company to destroy it or give it to Ukraine. Same thing with the Attacker missiles, the Abrams tanks, or the old generation. We're getting rid of all our used clothing, so to speak.
Did you bring a drone with you in that box?
What did you bring? All sorts of stuff in the box.
It's a drone that the military unit gave me over there. They picked it up off the battlefield. There's nothing spectacular about this other than.
Can we get the camera on Brian over there? And there it is. Okay.
This is the new face of warfare in Ukraine. This is what it's all about.
And they're manufacturing a lot of their own, are they not?
They are. Yeah. I work with a guy. He's got a little shop, a secondary business. He cranks out about 150 a month of these. We give him a hand once in a while. He's got a 3D printer. They make everything. So this is the new face of warfare. About 70 or 80% of the injuries over there are incurred by drone strikes nowadays, not artillery or bullets.
What is life like for the? You're in Kharkiv for a year.
Yes.
I mean, when there are far too few news stories now from war zones. Obviously, Gaza, almost not at all, but not nearly enough from Ukraine. When you see life going on, at least for me, who doesn't have the courage of you, I should be. Well, it happens to be true. I don't think I could move there and live there for a year and be delivering goods across the country. I don't think so. But in any case, and you see everyday life, people shopping. Going, what is like life every day like in Kharkiv?
It's something else. When we first went over there early in the war, we crossed the border and we thought there was going to be missiles raining down and bombs. And we went to Lviv. That's on the west end of the country. Life was relatively normal. You get used to the air raid sirens. In Kharkiv, they go off all the time. People basically just ignore them. They carry on with their soccer games. And if you went into an air raid shelter every time there was an air raid alert, you'd never get anything done.
But we were talking to Liz Walker a couple of minutes ago about trauma in this country. She was originally began in Roxbury, where she was head of the Roxbury Presbyterian Church. Is there not a low level of trauma, even if people are not conscious of it?
I think
everybody?
So. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of scars left on people's psyches when this is over.
The kids get it? I mean, what are kids like?
I feel sorry for the kids. They're the one, because if you think about it, they went from COVID isolation to all online schools because Russia was bombing the schools. So in Kharkiv, they've just built, I think, like a dozen or half a dozen underground schools, fortified.
Underground.
It's pretty twisted if you think about it, that you have to do that. But at least they have some social contact there. But these kids, there's going to be a lot of trauma, a lot of scars for decades coming.
And they are
this war.
working with youth organizations trying to get the kids out off to the west or out, western part of Ukraine or into Belarus or other places just to get them out of the direct war zone. But the whole mental health picture is a new place for aid in Ukraine because the Ukrainians there tend to have you don't need mental health, you just tough it out the attitude. And so trying to work that attitude and how to deal with soldiers who are injured, and that's becoming a big issue.
Yeah, the trauma among the soldiers is just going to be so long-lasting because in an old-fashioned war, you just had bullets and artillery primarily. Now you've got drones out there. You can be sleeping in a trench at midnight and a grenade falls out of the sky. A drone with thermal imaging can drop something. You don't get a break for a minute from worrying about a drone coming in. It's totally changed warfare. I can't imagine what these guys go through. We go there for a day, and it's pretty harrowing sometimes. I can't imagine these guys will go on 3-week rotations in a trench.
Brian Nolen, we mentioned poll numbers for President Zelensky, when he came back from that disgraceful performance by Vance and Trump in the Oval Office. Forget numbers for a second. The average person in your community, how do they feel about him and his leadership?
In Ukraine?
In Ukraine, yeah.
Ukraine. Mixed. It's like any political situation. There's people that voted for him, didn't vote for him. But what was funny is I know people that did not vote for him and didn't want to vote for him again when there's an election. Now they're going to vote for him just to spite.
Because of the Trump animus? Is that really true?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's what's happening in Canada today, as far as we know also.
Yeah, exactly. It's
incredible.
inflamed so many, just to stick it to the White House, they're going to do that.
And Vsevolod, what is the first time, I didn't know of him then, but obviously we go back and see him in these comedy television shows, and you can't believe this is the same courageous guy. What do people believe? What do Ukrainians believe has motivated him? The rumors, as you know, when the invasion started, he's getting out of the country. He's going to somewhere in Western Europe. He's going to be gone in a nanosecond. Not only is he not gone, he visits troops on the front lines almost every day.
Yeah, that was
what motivates this guy?
I think he woke up. I mean, let me back up. One thing I think that motivated him and motivates him to stand up to Trump is that in the onset of the invasion, he was the one that was believing Putin. He was the one that's saying, oh, no, we're going to negotiate. There won't be a war. Don't panic. It's all going to be fine. And that's where some of the people who say they're not going to vote for him, because they still remember those early moves. And they say, you weren't ready to go. But then when it hit, he pulled it together. And he said, I need ammunition and I don't need a ride. And his famous quote.
Yeah, I think he's right.
That was a great line.
And that part has made it work for him.
You mentioned before about going to the Europeans because Ukrainians are going to the Europeans because of what the United States kind of pulling the rug out from underneath them. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that they could rescue this situation if Trump does not come through, which he probably won't?
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is Putin is still attacking. And it's been said so many times that it's almost boring. But, if Russia stops, the war is over. Ukraine is not trying to take Russia. They don't care. But if Ukraine stops, then Putin will come right in. And Europe is afraid that if he comes in there, what's going to stop him from coming after the rest of us, especially the first Baltic states and then everybody else, because there is an overall mission of you want to take out the democratic point of view. You want to get to the point of view where you have the all-powerful leader and everybody else serves. And so Europe has a real vested interest. So do we. We have gained as you said, we're getting rid of our old equipment and getting new equipment due to this. We're getting training. We as the U.S., our guys are learning all about this new warfare without losing people and taking the chances. So the Soviet army, the Russian army has been, much more weakened and decimated. So we're winning here on this side.
Yeah, but he has the North Koreans.
Yeah.
I mean,
he had to call North Koreans in. He's not doing well.
Is it a million Russians at this point? I think I've read 1 million.
Who've lost their lives?
Lost their
over
lives.
900. But
and he's got people running out of leaving the country, and
So, unlike Brian, who brought a drone but won't give it to us, you apparently the 2 times you've been here, Vsevolod, you've been kind enough to leave us with something. Are you about to give us something today?
I am about
what
to
are
give
you
you
doing?
something. We have a group called the Ukrainian American Youth Association, and the women in that group get together and make these Easter eggs, Ukrainian Easter eggs, and we're still in the Easter egg thing. So they gave me an Easter egg apiece.
Those are gorgeous.
You could choose who wants which one.
They are beautiful.
And they asked me to pass them over.
These are these painted?
gorgeous.
These are yes. The word is pisanka.
Excuse me? Say that again?
Pisanka. Okay, those are eggs that were written on.
Can you see this?
Wow.
And
Can you get close up? It is gorgeous.
I think mine is prettier.
And it's
that is really
well. I was being a
beautiful.
little sexist.
But
I gave you the flowers and I
think this
gave
one
you the
is
geometric design.
Can you see mine? I don't know if you can see mine.
You can eat Jim's for lunch to get
That's
that.
right. There's mine.
No, there's no egg in there.
That's good. Brian, tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to help in any way they can.
So our website is probably the best way. NH4 Ukraine. We also have MA4Ukraine.org. So for those people who might not like our Republican governor or something like that, they can feel better. They can do mass number 4 Ukraine or MA. We're on Facebook under NH4 Ukraine, Instagram.
Are you going back?
I am. I'm home till about June 20th. I'm just here to do a bunch of fundraising talks. I do a lot of Rotary clubs. If anybody knows a Rotary club church group that might want a presentation, we'll come in and do anything from a half hour to.
Before you go, tell us quickly how much you pay per month for 1-bedroom apartment in Kharkiv.
$240.
$240. Life is good. More Americans should consider retiring there. Yeah, $3 a month for gig internet.
Brian, thank you. It's really good to meet you. Thanks for being here. And Vsevolod, as always, it's wonderful to see you.
That's great.
Thank
very
you so
much for coming in. We've been speaking with Vsevolod Petriv, president of the Boston chapter of the Ukrainian Congress Committee, and Brian Nolen, who has been going back and forth to Ukraine for 3 or 4 years?
3 years since the beginning of the war.
3 years now.
Yeah.
Founder of New Hampshire for Ukraine Aid Group. Here's the website. nh4ukraine.org. That's nh4, the number 4, ukraine.org. Thank you both for coming in.
Great to see you both.
After
Thanks
a quick break, another BPR awkward transition. We're opening the lines to talk about Bill Belichick, that interview on CBS Sunday morning where his 24-year-old girlfriend shuts down a line of questioning from off camera. Are we wrong with being obsessed with this romance? No. If so, we don't want it to be right. The lines are open next, 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, labor advocates have released their annual report on worker deaths and illnesses in the Commonwealth. The Massachusetts House is starting debate on its spending plan for the new fiscal year. And deaf students are less likely to find jobs in the sciences, healthcare, or teaching. Grants aimed to change that have ended. That's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked /1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the 2nd consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And GM Roth Design Remodeling, dreams delivered, with custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com.
Support the news you trust by donating your car, truck, or other used vehicle to our vehicle donation program. You'll have more space in the driveway this spring, and you may earn a tax advantage. Learn more at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browder, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. We are embarrassed with this transition.
We're always embarrassed.
But we are who we
by
are.
our transitions.
So on Sunday morning, I talked about this a little bit in my little one more thing. Half hour ago, CBS aired a conversation with Bill Belichick about his new book. It's called The Art of Winning. And if you were listening earlier in the show, I dedicated a couple of moments to discussion about how the can't look away aspects of the former New England Patriots head coach, like the increasingly evident power his 24-year-old girlfriend, his so-called creative muse, he calls her.
What does that mean?
Well, you think you do know, but don't say it. Holds over him. Jordan Hudson is her name. This is my favorite moment. She shuts, first of all, I heard, I can say this because I was listening to BZ Radio this morning, and they never editorialized. To their credit, straight news. One of the hosts said, he looks like he got dressed in a dumpster, which, I mean, the guy comes on in a ripped Navy sweatshirt.
Even you haven't gone that far.
Even though I haven't gone that far. About, he's asked by the reporter, whose name I forget, about how the two met. Something she herself was very proud, by the way, to talk about in a social media post commemorating their fateful meet cute aboard a plane 4 years ago. Here's what I think it was a tweet. Happy meet-aversary, Bill Belichick. Cheers to the fact that you still let me give you lengthy philosophical lectures 4 years later. Here's some exclusive sound our staff found of Jordan. This is Jordan Hudson, the creative muse, describing their relationship.
Yeah, we both have so much in common. Talking and not talking. We could not talk or talk forever and still find things to not talk about.
That's not Jordan Hudson. That's obviously Jennifer Coolidge playing the young wife or girlfriend of a 100-year-old rich guy in Best in Show. Since we can't look away ourselves, we're going to turn it over to you. Think of it as sort of, I guess it's a Monday, who is the a-hole? Are we jerks for sticking our noses into this coach's life? And I mean all of us, whether you're into sports or not. You're probably following a lot of the developments of Jordan Hudson's relationship with Bill Belichick, like your favorite team throughout the season. Or is something really odd going on? I mentioned the thing at the end that Jamie said to me, that this morning that, the thought when you're watching this video is Belichick should blink twice if he needs help. It sort of looked like a hostage video. I mean this sincerely, where there's almost like an elder abuse kind of thing going on. Let me do this again for you if you didn't hear it before. The reporter, who's a regular news reporter, excuse me, asked Belichick about how the two of them met. And again, she has already posted publicly about how they met.
Maybe that's not how they met, Jim.
He asked the question, the reporter asked the question of Belichick, and before Belichick has an opportunity to answer, a disembodied voice in another part of the room interrupts. And here's what she said when the reporter asked Belichick about how they met.
Not talking about this.
No.
We're not talking about this. Now, I have probably done, I make up a number, 5,000 interviews in my life, 10,000. You've probably done a greater number because of all your years reporting. How many times did a person you're not interviewing get involved in the middle of the discussion and interrupt the back and forth between you and the person you're interviewing?
Certainly not someone who is 50 years younger than the person.
Well, that's not fair. Or of any age, 49 years, by the way, any age differential.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No, I think that is, I mean, sometimes there will be like a public relations person who will...
Not in the middle of the interview.
Well, maybe they will try to...
Never happened to me.
The interview.
Before or after is one thing.
Well, you were on TV. Because it would be a little bit more obvious on TV. But if you're newspaper reporting, might have somebody saying you don't want to go there. But I was, I've never seen anything quite like that.
Okay, we want to know your thoughts on this. We assume everybody's seen the video. 877-301-8970. By the way, we even thought, at least I did, this was too low rent for us before yesterday. The Belichick thing, we discuss it with Trenni every Tuesday. But yesterday was a whole different level. He literally comes in looking, as I said, from this BZ anchor this morning, like he got dressed lost in a dumpster. He comes in with a ripped sweatshirt. It says Navy on. I think his father was a coach at Navy when he was a little boy, if I remember correctly. And then he's asked questions about Kraft. I said this before. He says, the reporter says, Kraft said you were fired. He says, mutual decision. Well, so he said he let you go. Mutual decision. And then the Jordan woman interrupts in the middle of it. What do you make of this? And by the way, in a moment of seriousness, well, I'm not a fan of Bill Belichick's only because of how he treats reporters like total garbage. Not yesterday so much, but in general. But did you not watch this thing and not have concern for his freedom and health?
Listen to this from Ingrid in Somerville. I think this Jordan woman is a hero. She's got him so whipped up. He's treated everyone around him like dirt for years. So let a hot-to-trot younger woman tell him what's up. Love to see it.
Not talking about this.
Okay, there she is. 877-301-8970.
Here's another texter who says, listen, I just wish they would lean in and do a reality show.
Well, it was foul. And if you saw it, you'd worry about Bill Belichick, even if you're not a fan of Bill Belichick. And by the way, can you imagine a man or a woman of some repute or any repute who's in the middle of a discussion with somebody else and somebody off in the corner interrupts and speaks for you? I mean, I know what people are thinking.
You know, think of all those reporters who've been shut down by him over the years.
Oh, loving it.
Just shut down by him. And as Ingrid says, it takes a gorgeous young 24-year-old to put him in his place.
Not talking about this.
That's what she said.
Somebody else says enough bimbo shaming here.
It's not bimbo shaming. Is it bimbo shaming? I don't think it's bimbo shaming in the slightest.
Shaming either. No, I don't. I mean, she's pretty savvy.
By the way, my attitude, even though let me be clear about this, even though this relationship is really odd, I should say, if you're into it and you're happy and no one's being mistreated, it's fine. Yesterday gives cause, at least to me, that something unpleasant may be afoot here.
Well, I'm going to say what I say again.
What is it?
Just reverse the ages.
Oh, if it was a woman.
A 73 or so. How old is he? 74?
He just turned 73.
Okay, 73-year-old man, a woman with a 24-year-old man, we would be horrified.
It's only 49 years.
Coast to coast.
It's 49-year difference. It's not that much of a difference.
We would be grossed out from coast to coast.
Okay. Anonymous texter, yeah, Jim, she's elder abusing his brains out. I think there's a message in that is not the message that I was describing
My favorite is the shots of them on the beach where he's lying down with his back in the sand. He's got his arms
it's like a Cirque du Soleil thing,
kind of like a fly on its back, but he's got stronger thighs than the fly because he's holding her up in the air, Cirque du Soleil-like, while she does her acrobatics.
We have sound of the discussion of that. Here's this.
There's some great pictures of you and Jordan where you're a fisherman and she's a mermaid. It's charming. It's a different side of you. What's the reaction been like?
What's it been like?
To have these different sort of photos. There's another one where you're doing, I know you're not into meditation or yoga or Pilates. You're balancing Jordan on your feet and she's doing kind of the Titanic pose.
Yeah, so I'm on some of those social media platforms, but I honestly don't follow them.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Impossible?
By the way, that wasn't the acrobatic
yes,
thing. It wasn't. This was the earlier one on Valentine's Day or something when she is dressed up as a mermaid and he's dressed up as a fisherman
with a big hook.
Right, that's not the same as the ballet
I think the second
positioning.
one was you're balancing on your feet.
Yeah.
And she's doing some kind of Titanic pose.
Okay.
I think that's what he was
Let's
trying
take some calls.
But hold on.
Okay, let's not take some calls.
Is it possible? Because she posts almost everything.
Yes, she does.
Is it possible that she doesn't show them to him?
No, I mean, what are you talking about?
Well,
he was asked yesterday about it. He said, remember he said years ago, he was asked about social media. He says, I'm not on my face, is what he said.
Exactly. I mean, it's possible that she doesn't know. I mean, he doesn't know the extent of which the posting.
He totally knows, and I think he's loving it.
He probably doesn't know how to check things out on wherever she's posting.
By the way, in all fairness, because people think that I'm not being fair to her, my understanding is she actually did let him out of the closet to come do the interview, and then she locked him back up at the end of the day. Thank you very much. Maisie, you in Needham, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. I really love your show.
Yeah.
I think Belichick looks like a fool.
Yeah.
And I think using an actress to sound really dumb as a way of imitating this woman is sexist.
It is.
And I think this isn't even show worthy.
Yeah, we had a big debate
Just
about
my
that.
fault.
And no, you're entitled to say that. And I have to say, I love whenever anybody thinks something is too low rent for us, I blame it on Marjorie. I have
That's
to
right.
say, I was all in on this one. I watched this video twice, not once, but twice yesterday, Maisie. There's something amiss in this situation. And I hear you about playing the Jennifer Coolidge thing, but I think it was fair, but I totally respect your position. Thanks for the call. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying it's a sick kind of a sick yuppie relationship.
Yeah, it's sort of sick. Maisie, thanks for the call.
But
we appreciate it.
But the sexism, again, as I've said a million times
say it
now,
again. Say it a few more times.
Is a lot of people. I mean, somebody somebody just texted. He's an old rich guy. She's a hot young woman. I think they're both getting something out of this relationship, and we probably shouldn't kink shame them. But again, if this were a 73-year-old woman and a 24-year-old man, it would be.
Yeah, but can I tell you something? This is where you and I are. It isn't my preferred kind of thing, but there are a lot of couples I know who have aged not 49 years, no, not 50 years, who appear to be quite happy. Yesterday was troubling. It was troubling.
I think that's the thing.
What's
you could say 10 years,
10
15 years, 20 years,
30 even,
maybe 30 years.
I've seen
some
a lot of good 30s.
Some people look very, 30-year-old woman, 60-year-old man, 50 years. This is a new frontier, Jim.
Yeah.
I don't even think. Well, I should take that back. What about Thurman, the senator? Right, Strom.
He was
Thurmond.
100 when he married the 33-year-old. Yeah. And by the way, they looked very happy. They looked very happy. Senator from South Carolina.
He might hold the record.
Segregationist.
Didn't they have a kid together?
I think they had a kid. Yeah, I think they had a kid the kid was older than the mother. I know that's hard, but they think about that for a while and call me in the morning. In any case, Sheila's watching on YouTube, says something interesting. Sometimes our granddad wants to say something he shouldn't, so we try to steer him in a different direction.
And here's another question.
Please.
If she's looking out for his best interest,
yeah.
I mean, what was the message of the torn, ripped shirt?
I think he's a troubled man.
Yeah, but if she's got so much control over him, wouldn't she say, Bill?
She would only let him wear the torn one yesterday because he'd been a bad boy. We're going to get fired for this probably by the end of the show. So let's just keep it up and have fun.
Okay.
And we won't be back tomorrow.
Okay.
877-301-8970.
It was like watching a Chris Hansen to catch a predator.
How come no one, by the way, the first caller had very fair criticism of Marjorie, maybe not that fair of me, but how come everybody's seen this video, how can you not be concerned about the welfare of a guy who I do not like at all from afar, but he's an older guy who obviously is at least to me, is in a troubled relationship. Can we hear...
Mel from Littleton wants to know, wonder what his adult kids think of her.
Well, I've thought a lot about that too, by the way. But I mean, again, that's whatever. They're into it. Okay, where are we going here? 877-301-8970. Rob in Cambridge, you're next on, what is this? Boston Public Radio. Hi.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I wonder if Bill Belichick is in the very early stages of dementia, because I've seen elderly people who seem to have a sudden personality change and start to do things that they would never ordinarily do. And then maybe a year or two later, it becomes clear that they were starting to slip. So that's my theory.
Well, you're not. Neither of us are doctors, so I don't know. I know there's an issue. There clearly, to me, if you've been a student of Belichick, which I guess all of us in this community have been for decades since he began coaching the Patriots, this is not a typical Belichick. And you might say it's because he's in love. He's found his creative muse. What do you think creative muse means? But if it's not that, the control thing. Can we have the sound again? He's asked the question, how'd you two meet? And before Belichick gets a chance to answer, here's his creative muse.
I'm not talking about this.
No.
That's chilling. I mean, and by the way, you know who sits there saying nothing when the reporter says no and Jordan says no?
Bill Belichick.
Belichick just sits there like a bump on a log. I mean...
Here's a texter who says, in my office, we refer to the couple as Bill Belichick and his common law granddaughter.
Oh, that's really unkind. You're something shaming.
David,
your
watching on
shaming.
YouTube, says, my mom is 74. I'm 26. This whole scenario is like my dating my mom. Or she could be even a grandmother.
No, actually, I have to correct it. It's not. You're only 48 years younger than your mother. Jordan is 49 years younger than Mr.
Not
Belichick.
talking about this.
Exactly.
Tony from Holden thinks, I think Boston Public Radio should substitute all celebrity conversations with state budgets and economics.
Well, we did. We did that this morning with Evan Horowitz.
And Jim was so excited.
I was like in
and
heaven.
Jim is so mortified by this. But
You know
it's
what
too
Evan
late
Horowitz
now.
is to me? My creative muse. That's what. 877-301-8970. By the way, it's fine if you want to call and criticize us like the first caller did. Very politely, I should say, that we really have stooped to a new low even for us.
A texter says Al Pacino, his girlfriend with whom he just had a kid, is 55 years younger.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's a problem, don't you think?
I do.
So let me ask you, as a serious person, which you sort of are, if you
Not really.
Well, if you saw, you were troubled by this video too yesterday, not just the age differential thing, right?
Well, yes, it was.
So what should happen? One of he has sons, right? They should call him up, and what happens? What do you think happens?
Well, they want to make sure she doesn't have a Machiavellian hold over Dad. I think it's odd that she's there. Interrupting the interview.
Interrupting.
Yeah, and boy, she's really self-possessed for somebody that's so young.
Did you know what I said before was true? I don't know if you knew this before, that he put out a memo to everybody, an email, I'd say a month ago or 6 weeks ago, saying that every single communication directed at him, whether it was about football or personal
has to go through her.
has to go through her. Which, now maybe that's not so weird because maybe she's like his assistant kind of thing. But there is a control issue, which I think is one worth exploring.
A couple of you have texted about the age difference between President Macron of France and his wife.
We looked that up.
She's
It's like
older.
20-something.
It's 20-something years. So that's unusual, obviously, because she's the older woman.
I'm not troubled by
that
these
far.
age differential
Like I said, when you get up past 40 years, I mean, think about your 17-year-old daughter. Well,
it's like the guy with his mother. It's like dating his mother here. I don't know if he's contemplating dating his mother, but I don't think he is. I think he was just painting the picture. Let's go to Brian in New Bedford. Brian, welcome to the show. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Hi. I don't think you should be wasting your time with this.
Why?
I really think it does stoop to a new low.
Even for us?
I'd like to know if Trump met Melania through Epstein. That would be a better topic.
Well, believe me, if we had some information on
Yeah.
it, we'd let you know, but we don't know.
I have never heard that.
Sounds like you could be as low rent as we could be, Brian, under the right circumstances. Depends on what the circumstance. True, he says. You're an honest man, Brian. Thank you from New Bedford. Appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is the...
here's a theory that Bill Belichick actually met her not on an airplane, but on some sugar daddy website, and that maybe he's worried about
you are, because you were a tabloid kind of gal your former life.
I am a low-rent
You
girl.
suggested off the air today that the reason she interrupted, when I said to you when we were preparing for the segment, Long and Hard, I said, well, she's posted already, as I read before,
That they met in an
how they
airplane.
met. And you said, well, maybe they didn't. And she's concerned that he's going to out the real thing.
Yeah.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Could be.
That is
I really...
incredibly. Can you imagine if you were still at the Herald, you could get about 35 columns out of this, wouldn't you say? Like maybe a year's worth of columns.
Absolutely.
Like one every couple of days.
Absolutely. We'd have to chase them around, there, North Carolina until we got the interview.
Okay, Gene, we have no idea where you are, but we're really happy to have you. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm okay. I'm just saying that I agree with you, Jim.
Yeah.
I listened to that, saw that, and I thought that was really rude, and it was sort of disturbing because it was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of you.
That's it. I just wanted to say.
That's it. Well, you said it beautifully. Thank you, Gene. Appreciate it.
Belichick is the most overrated football coach in NFL history. Brady made him.
I agree
He went
with
out
that.
of his
I
way to
agree
be
with
a dick to everybody in his entire career. I hope she takes him for every dollar she can, and I hope he falls off his ego.
By the way, for those who are not sports fans, his stock in trade was to be as disrespectful and demeaning to reporters who asked totally legitimate questions as is humanly possible. So that's why some people are happy about him allegedly getting his comeuppance or whatever.
Here's Jay from Waltham. Hi, Marjorie and Jim. I was going to call in to discuss today's topic, but my girlfriend said, we're not talking about that today.
Not talking about this.
And that was it.
By the way, can you put
shut her right
all
down?
of you
Shut him right down.
Put yourselves in this. For those who are feeling we are
even you don't do
embarrassing
that.
even ourselves.
You don't do that.
Well, no. I mean, I'm
You
on
don't
the
say,
air.
Marjorie,
we're equal.
We're not talking about
no,
that.
but
today.
we're
Not talking about this.
Well, she just said we're equals. We're not. I'm not like I'm sitting in the corner of the room. It's like going to a job. Imagine if you haven't been interviewed by a reporter. You're in a job interview. and your granddaughter, or what? Not your granddaughter, your young girlfriend
his granddaughter.
is sitting in the corner of the room, and the potential employer asks you a question, and the girlfriend answers for you.
Think about this: if you're a politician,
what's that?
You're
Another example.
You're giving a news conference.
Meet the press.
Yes, and your spouse interjects in the middle of the interview to tell you.
Your very young spouse. I mean.
Well, any spouse. I mean, can you imagine any spouse interrupting their politician? A spouse, whether it be a husband or a wife. I mean, if it was a husband telling a wife, that would be the end of it.
So why is it you and I seem to be much more exercised by this than our listeners do?
Because we're low rent, Jim.
Thank you.
Let's embrace it.
Suze, thank you. We don't need the drum thing.
You pretend you want to talk about tax policy all the time.
I do. I wasn't nearly as excited about that. That was Suze in Framingham. Welcome to the show there. Hey there. Hi.
Hi. It's been a while.
Well, glad to have you back. Hi.
Yes. I think that she's afraid he was going to out them about how they actually met.
That's what Marjorie said.
I dated a guy I met on the subway one time, only to discover he told his friends that we went to school together. He didn't bother to tell me the lie, so I couldn't back him up on it. But I'm disgusted by the age difference, too.
Yeah.
So you buy into Marjorie's line of thinking that she's worried he's going to expose a seedier beginning to their... This is really embarrassing. Relationship. Suze, thank you. We're glad to hear from you again. It's been a while. Cole's again soon.
Creative muse means she inspires his creativity, says Laura from Cohasset. I don't want to know what his newfound creativity is all about.
By the way, we didn't make that up. In the book, whatever the book is called, the new book about how to coach or something, whatever it is, in the book, in the acknowledgments, he refers to her as his creative muse. By the way, an anonymous texter says, would have been much more presentable if Belichick showed up for a 60 Minutes interview in a dickie. Dickie. Thank you. Thank you for pronouncing it perfectly.
Okay. Come on, Jim. Bill had the biggest grin on his face I've ever seen him with.
I don't think he did at all. Did you? You watched it, right? You didn't just hear it?
I did.
What do you think of him?
He looked a little out of it.
Yeah.
But, he looked to me a lot of out of it when he was giving those press conferences with the Patriots.
Yeah. Did he look like if someone interrupted him in the middle, he'd just sit there like a...
What was the thing? We're moving on to Cleveland.
Well, that's when you didn't want to discuss a horrible game. Yeah.
Yeah, just that same repeating it and looking sort of without affect.
Okay, let's go to Bill in the car.
Hi, Bill in the car.
Luckily, this is almost over for all of our listeners. We're almost as happy as you are. Hi, Bill. Go ahead.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Fine,
Great.
thank you.
I just have one thing to say. I think that, you guys are talking about this like it's a surprise thing, but it's been going on historically for many years. But even between gay men, look at what Liberace and both Rock Hudson, they both had young men in their lives that dominated and controlled them. And
they did. But, I didn't think it was 50 years, Bill, though, right? It's more like 20 years, maybe 25
49.
years.
It's not 50.
Yeah, well, 49. Okay.
Well, it's 49.
Not 50. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. There is but another thing, and I'm an older man, and I'll admit that most men will not admit to this, but single men, this is their dream. This is their fantasy.
I'm sorry. I don't think that most single men I know who are in their 60s or 70s or even 80s want to be dating somebody who is their girlfriend's age. Do you really think that, Bill?
Well,
no, underlying all of that reality, Jim, there's that fantasy in the back of the mind that always is playing against what the common sense in society tells them is right and wrong.
All right.
No, I get it. I think there's a fantasy there, but I don't think it's 50 years. You know why?
Why?
Because you look ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like
I'm always, when Jerry walks in the room, I'm always trying to come up with a question.
He made a big face when he was walking in.
It's hard to walk in.
Yeah.
Did you watch the tape? Watch the interview?
I saw clips this morning.
Okay, and what'd you think?
Well, I think that there's definitely something unusual happening.
You think
here.
so?
I mean, how many times have we interviewed very famous people or very wealthy people or very powerful people? Only once in my time have I ever had something like that happen.
Oh, who did
Was someone interrupted?
Yeah.
A press person or something?
It was a press person.
Who?
Actually, twice.
Who?
Yeah, I've had press people do it.
Who was it?
One was Paris Hilton because they told us we weren't allowed to ask about her prison stay,
And you
which
did?
I didn't agree to,
Good
and then
for
they
you.
still stepped in.
Good for
and
you.
They actually, and that case, I think they stopped it. The other one was John McCain when he was running for president the first time, and I started to ask about his campaign hemorrhaging cash and what did that represent in terms of failure. And his press person stepped in to stop it. And this is why I so admired him. He stepped in. He said, "No, I will sit here and answer every last one of his questions."
Good for him.
Yeah.
Because he was a man of integrity. What unfolded with this interview is really, really bizarre.
Very bizarre.
If we get Jordan Hudson on the show, do you think Bill Belichick is going to interrupt the interview or not? I don't think so either. Okay,
Ross in Brighton says Bill's kids have to call her mom.
I
didn't realize the age.
By the way, I
difference was
didn't get
significant.
it. I just want to be clear. If you're writing our bosses saying how disgusting the show is, which you should, by the way, Marjorie is the one who has dwelled on that issue. I have been above that issue.
Actually, we just got a text that Liberace's boyfriend was 40 years younger. So I'm wrong about that. I didn't think it was that much younger.
You didn't think it was that much?
But it's still not 50. Even Liberace did not go that far.
He was a teenager? He was a teenager?
Let's hope he was over 18.
Okay, by the way, let's just erase this segment from our archives.
I'm looking down here at Liz Walker's book. Why didn't you ask Liz Walker about this?
That's a very good question. She had to go, or whatever. I would have.
Yeah,
I was intending
forget
to.
It.
Okay, what are you doing on the show?
It's a really good book, by the way.
Quickly. Go ahead.
I can't wait to read it. We're speaking with 3-time U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky, who is retiring. He has this really cool. He has a big retirement party happening on the top of the Jenga building, the BU Jenga building, which is such a landmark. So it'll be this huge event. It's free. And then because we've been talking about this Cuts to Arts funding, we're going to look at the fallout. We're speaking with somebody from the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the founder of Art Stays Here to talk about grassroots efforts, philanthropic efforts to figure out how the funding for the arts will continue. And then we'll have a public art tour with Julia Swanson, as we do every month.
When are you doing the Belichick segment? Later in the show?
Yeah, we're skipping that one.
Because we covered it so well?
Maybe for the week in review.
After I see how HR hands down your decision, I'll decide how we're weighing into it.
Thank you very much.
Thank
nice to see you,
for
Jerry. We'll be listening
to another saucy edition of Boston Public Radio.
First 2.5 hours were great.
That's right. The end got a little saucy-ish. Anyway, you can keep up with this 24/7 wherever podcast, or check out our TikTok page, Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow we are live at the Boston Public Library with NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey. We'll have to ask her about this, Jim. CNN's John King. A conversation with the leaders behind Lawyers Defending American Democracy. Founder and former Massachusetts
One of
AG.
them is, by the way, former AG Scott Harshbarger.
Scott Harshbarger and Executive Director Lauren Ricklin. Plus Vanessa and Casey White of Jaju pierogies ahead of their appearance on Shark Tank. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Ed and Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, our executive producer, Jane Baloney. Special thanks to Patrick Lally for running the YouTube stream today and showing our Ukrainian eggs, which you're thrilled to get.
They're quite beautiful.
Stay tuned to The Culture Show with Jared Bowen, starting immediately after us here on 89.7 GBH. I am Marjorie Egan.
And if you're complaining to the boss, it's Margery. I'm Jim Rowley.
I'm not talking about this.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And M&M Skylights, installing and servicing the full range of commercial and residential V-Lock skylight products. More information about their installation process and consultations can be scheduled at mmskylights.com. In this hypnotically cinematic love letter flowing through time and generations, a young director untangles her family's past. Watch POV, The Taste of Mango, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org.